Act 8 written by RPM, Mike Loder, Ross McKenzie, Chris Wilmore, David Ty, Kevin E. and Caroline Searide. http://www.tkeep.org/tilde/rpm/converging_series == act the story so far. Act I. In an alternate reality where Ranma married Shampoo, their daughter had somehow obtained a magic locket that allowed her to cross dimensions. A few accidents later, several of Ranma's children from various realities ended up in one reality, where Ranma was still a teenage youth. One among them, Ryo Saotome, son of Ranma and Fukayu, managed to get a hold of the locket before Cologne was about to do something devious with it. Following his victory, Ryo sent all the children of Ranma and company to their proper realities, and then prepared to go home himself. Something, however, went wrong. He ended up in a bizarre version of Tokyo in 2096 and accidentally dragged along Radiko Hibiki and Childra Jansen in his attempt to fix this mistake. That attempt dragged him to two other realities with amazing speed. From them, he accidentally brought Miyabi, daughter of Ranma and Akan, and Ishido, a mysterious amnesiac hunted by a shadowy organization. Finally, they stopped in a reality where Ranma and company were still teens, but had never met them before. Act II, Children, curious as to what caused their dimensional/reality shift, watched Ryo Saotome closely, and discovered that the locket is the source of their troubles. She tried, and succeeded, in stealing the locket from him without his noticing. Radiko schemed to make sure that the history of his world took place, and began a plan to kill Ranma and frame Miyabi for the murder. He succeeded in getting a blood sample from her and a torn piece of her clothing, but was interrupted before he could go through with his plan. In a talk with Ishido, he found out about a certain umbrella-wielding maniac threatening to kill Ryuga in Ishido's reality. In a panic, Radiko rushed to Childra, and accidentally triggered the locket. The three of them found themselves on a bridge somewhere. Before they left, they accidentally dragged along Ryo Muhoshin, a person that looked amazingly like Ikarugo Sankuzi, but in truth was a bit more devious. Bringing him along, the four crossed several realities, narrowly escaping danger, capture, and death. Then they returned to the Niruma they had left from, with an irate Ryo Saotome waiting for them. Meanwhile, Miyabi had put up with the antics of her grandparents, Sun and Janma, who were overjoyed at her existence, distressed at the way her parents were fighting, greatly annoyed at her trans-dimensional half-brother Ryo Saotome, and had decided that a talk with grandmother Nodoka was in order. Act III, Miyabi went to Nodoka's to talk, unaware that Ranma's life was in danger due to the promise Janma made to Nodoka regarding manliness and Ranma's upbringing. The end result was that Nodoka was invited to dinner, expecting to see her son, daughter-in-law, and granddaughter. Miyabi's age, almost that of Ranma, was, unfortunately, not foreseen as a major problem by Miyabi. Upon returning from her accidental trip through time, Children surrendered the locket to Ryo Saotome once again. Meanwhile, the extra passenger they picked up, Ryo Muhoshin, passed himself off as Ryo Gosunkuzi, son of Gosunkuzi and Yukaiu, and had everyone fooled. Nabuki got a hold of the material Radiko was planning to frame Miyabi with and used it to blackmail him into buying her dinner, among other things. They end up at Ukin's, where he washed dishes to pay for things. He eventually got drunk, hit on Yukaiu, and was knocked out by a blow to the head. Children and Ishido became more intimately attached. When his guard was down, Ryo Saotome was knocked out by Ryo Muhoshin, who then accidentally triggered the locket and disappeared into times and places unknown. Ryo Saotome woke up much later to find the locket gone, an image of it burned in his hand, and discovered what was inside the locket. A picture of him and Belle-chan, his fiancée. Activity. Ryo Saotome began making plans to assemble the locket that he was apparently destined to create, the photo from the locket being proof of that. Meanwhile, Radiko spent the day with Nabuki, buying her food and treats while also beginning to feel somewhat attracted to her. Ishido and children sorted through their fears and anxieties, but in the end came together in a happy reunion within the local graveyard. Miyabi and the Tendo household held a dinner for Nodoka, who was expecting to see her son at last. What happened instead was that she had an interesting experience with a time traveler, Tako's eyes, and realized that Miyabi was, in fact, Ranma's daughter from the future. She also assumed that Ranko was Janma's daughter from an affair. Soon briefly assumed Akan was Janma's child from an affair with his deceased wife. Things got ugly, but got better again as they usually did, although Nodoka still thinks Ranko is Janma's illegitimate child. Meanwhile, under the distrustful eyes of children and Ishido, Ryo Saotome used the arcane resources within Tako's eyes room to create the locket. Act V. Ryo Muhoshin, having borrowed the locket from Ryo Saotome by means of an umbrella applied to the back of the head, found himself whisked away to a postmodern, futuristic world populated by thousands of Kasumis, Ryugas, and other familiar faces. Ministry of Confusion. After losing the locket in a fall, he settled in and tried to make the best of it, striking up a friendship with a Kasumi extender named Ami. The relationship progressed to the point of a date, at the end of which Ami was murdered by a berserk Ryuga extender. Muhoshin killed him in retaliation, and began a slow but methodical hunt for Ryugas across the city. Ryo Saotome, having remade the locket with some help from 3 goddesses of time, arrived in this world just as Muhoshin killed a Ryuga to recover his own locket. The two fought inconclusively, with Muhoshin escaping. Leaving Ministry of Confusion in a hurried fashion, Muhoshin rescued one world's Kasumi from a group of terrorists intent on beating her to death. A veteran time jumper already, she took the name Kaeri to distinguish herself from the more serene person she had been. The two stayed together for a few weeks, with Kaeri recovering and picking up some of Muhoshin's skills. Still obsessed with the need to protect her family, Kaeri prevailed upon Muhoshin to take her to Nerima and off they went. Act behind Havoc wisely allowed Ryo to take the lead in a brisk walk through Nerima. As a result, she found herself lost in Africa. Obeying her wishes, Ryo Muhoshin brought Kaeri to Nerima, the version of Nerima that just happened to be the resting place for Ishido, Childra, and the others. Miyabi hatches a plan to use Havoc's tape recording equipment to make a fake conversation between Ranma and Akan, so as to discourage the other rivals and possibly nudge the two closer together. Ryo, after having just one of those days, hunted for Ranma. Instead of finding him, he had another one of those days. Ryo Saotome chased Ryo Muhoshin across the worlds, stumbling through across strange realities, and learning that he has more power over the locket than he knew. Ryo Muhoshin and Saotome confronted each other once more, with the end result being dozens of injuries and a destroyed building. This convinced Ryo Saotome that bringing in Muhoshin would require a team effort. Kaeri spied upon the Tendo household, finding out, much to her distress, about the fate of her family in Ryo and Childra's world and causing much confusion among them until Ryo Saotome, returning from other worlds, runs into her. She tells him her tale, leaving out her involvement with Ryo Muhoshin, and asks for his help in putting an end to the timeline that creates Ryo and Childra's world. Ryo said number Kaeri hit him when he wasn't looking and took the locket. Just before she disappeared, Ryo Saotome, Ishido, and Ryo jumped into the fading afterglow of the locket and all disappeared. Act VII, Kaeri traveled through time and realities to prevent the tragedy that gave birth to the reality of Ranma 2096, and succeeded in doing so. However, doing so did not change history as she expected it to, but only split the timeline into a reality where it did happen and where it didn't. Shattered by this fact, Kaeri went into a catatonic state. Ryo Saotome and his party of time trippers arrived just as she collapsed and brought her back. With the locket once more in his possession, Ryo Saotome went with Ishido and Childra to once again stop Ryo Muhoshin's cross-dimensional murdering spree, leaving Miyabi to care for Kaeri. Ryo, believing Kaeri's intent to eliminate his timeline made her too dangerous to live, schemed to kill her. After a battle in a mysterious deserted city, Ryo Muhoshin was defeated, but only after he had an epileptic fit which seemed to be linked to the locket which was now embedded in his chest and poisoning his body. Miyabi walked into Kaeri's room, only to find Ryo just about to kill the unconscious girl. And now, Converging Series Act VII Converging Series Act 8 For a moment, there was a deadly silence in Kaeri Tendo's room. Ryo Hibiki stood frozen, holding a pillow, hovering over Kaeri's head. He gave a very loud audible gulp. Maybe this assassination wouldn't go too smoothly. Miyabi Tendo was slowly emitting a large red aura which looked remarkably like that of her mother, the indomitable Akan Tendo. What do you think you're doing? She managed to squeeze through clenched teeth. Radiko gave a nervous smile. We are fluffing pillows. Yeah, that's it. She began fluffing the pillow a lot. See? Fluffing, right? I'm fluffing. Don't want her to get uncomfortable, right? Miyabi slowly approached, her demeanor suddenly going from psychotic to smiling. Oh really? Radiko laughed nervously, then covered his mouth. Every fiber of his being was screaming at him to get out of there, but... Ooh, you, Radiko. Miyabi cooed, coming up close to him. That's sweet of you. Radiko mumbled, trying to back away from her slowly. At least until a wall came up behind him. And all the while, Miyabi was slowly coming up quite close to him, a seductive smile on her face, fluttering her eyelashes. And what were you doing with Kaeri, Rabi-chan? Miyabi murmured, quite close now. Well, you know, kill her. And she moved her lips next to his ear, her breath tickling his skin. Then she yelled, Arigiko no BAK. And suddenly, a fist entered his field of vision. And another. And another. Miyabi displayed the speed and skill inherited from her father in a dazzling array of elbows, knees, punches, and kicks that battered Radiko like a tornado in a matter of seconds. And then, displaying the might of her mother's side, she pulled out a giant mallet and sent him on the aerial tour of Niruma. Sighing, Miyabi turned back to Kaeri, sitting down by her bedside and reaching out to brush back a few loose strands. Poor Auntie Kasumi. Her eyes fell across the scar, and for a moment, she thought back to what Ryo Saotome had said about Kaeri, which was practically nothing. She frowned. Ryo. Big dummy. Why did she have to listen to him? Just because he thought he knew everything. He had to order everyone around. And he had to be so secretive too. Like anyone cared about him and his troubles. Well, she'd show him. She'd show him. And everyone else that she could be just as good. Just because she had been spending her time trying to get Mom and Dad together. She sobered quickly. Mumber didn't want to think about that. She missed her family. And looking down at Kaeri, she began to feel that this Kasumi who was not Kasumi, felt the same way. She reached down to squeeze Kaeri's unconscious fingers. I guess it's just you and me, right, Auntie? There was no answer. Flying. It was a wonderful sensation, thought Radiko, something to enjoy. Normally he enjoyed it when he was in his cursed form, at his female fruit bat. Today, however, there was a problem. He was in the bat, and yet he was airborne. This kinda feels nice, he thought to himself. Wonder how I'm gonna land. Gray concrete and blue sky swirled around him, along with a mix of stars. Fortunately for him, hibikis are generally sturdy, and even this, the most cowardly sign of that family, had a fair amount of endurance to him. Which is why, after landing on his face, he suffered only a sore neck and a broken nose. Ow! Radiko stood up slowly, wobbling on his feet. He gently touched his nose, which reacted by sending a fresh wave of pain straight to his brain. Ow! Yes, it was definitely broken. He ripped off his bandana and covered his nose with it, but it was too late to keep his face clean. Streaks of blood had already run down his face, giving him the appearance of being far more hurt than he really was. That appearance didn't get any better when he tripped and fell flat on his face. Ow! Which is where the passing ambulance came in. He'd managed to fall right in front of it as he tripped and fell. By the time he managed to stand up again, they finally saw him. And they hit him. Wham! It was an accident, really. Hey, Taki, we just hit a guy. I think we did, Koji. Oh man. Quick! Get him in the ambulance and trunk him. If we drug him up enough, he might not remember. Good idea. Before Radiko could get up again, he found himself picked up, dropped on a stretcher, and slid into the back of the ambulance. He tried to say something, but the world was still spinning entirely too much for him to get some proper sentences arranged for vocalization. Instead, he just said, "Ugh," and then he felt a slight pricking sensation on his arm and the world went black. Miyabi was fuming. It had been a few hours and she was still waiting for Ryo. It would have been so much easier if she knew what she was waiting for, but she turned to look at Kaeri, who was still quiet and motionless. Sighing, Miyabi sat down at Kaeri's bedside, tilting her head to watch her silently. Her attention was drawn to the large pink scar across Kaeri's face. She shuddered slightly. No one she knew in her universe ever got hurt or angry. Well, not for long. She sighed. Bored. No use sulking like this. What would Mum do? Wait. Fight with Dad. Mumber and Inebiki would go earn money, but she didn't think it was a big deal. And Kasumi? She'd tell stories. Stories. She looked at Kaeri. The last thing Radiko remembered was hitting the ground. Or was that being hit to the ground? He wasn't entirely sure. The world was a warm and fuzzy place, literally. Everything was so not focused, and everything had a weird echo too. Echo, wee. Something felt odd, not quite right. He felt around with clumsy fingers and realized that there was something on his nose. It was hard, and cold, and didn't seem to be removable. A part of him wondered if he'd been drugged up. This, however, was the common sense area, and Radiko rarely paid attention to that. He stood up from the bed, yes, it seemed to be a bed, and stumbled around until he found himself before a mirror. Being a hibiki, that was a fairly impressive accomplishment done considering it was done under 10 minutes. The mirror seemed blurry. He tried wiping it down a few times, but that didn't seem to help. Then he wiped his eyes a bit, and that made everything clearer. Oh, he had, it seemed, a cast on his nose. And it made him look sort of sort of funny, actually. Look at me. Clown. Radico stumbled and bumbled all around his room, giddy with laughter but not entirely sure what he was laughing at anymore. It didn't matter. He was feeling groovy, so everything was groovy. And with that in mind, he continued to happily groove about the place, not heeding what or who he ran into. Hibikis are known for several things. One of them is the talent to get spectacularly lost. Another is their above-average strength. Hibikis also are always good at generating spectacular amounts of ki when under emotional stress. Finding himself in the hospital, bandaged, and with various drugs circulating in his system, Radico was a time bomb just waiting to blow. And it did. Andy, can you hear me? Asked Miyabi softly, kneeling by Kaeri's side. Andika. Kaeri? Miyabi frowned. It would take some time to get used to that name. I don't know if you can hear me, continued Miyabi hesitantly, but I hope you can. You used to take care of me a lot when I wasn't feeling well, so I guess this is my chance to do the same for you. Miyabi pulled the blanket around Kaeri, making sure she was tucked in nicely, then gently caressed her forehead with her hand. It didn't seem to ease Kaeri's pained, haunted face. When I was sick, hurt, or just feeling sad, I remember you always used to tell me these stories. I really don't know what's wrong with you, but I hope it'll help. Miyabi took a small moment to curse Ryo Saotome for not telling her what was wrong with Kaeri. Then she closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and tried to remember the first tale Kasumi had ever told. If one could peer into the mind of Kaeri, formerly Kasumi Tendo, one would see absolute darkness. The horrific realization that her entire family was damned, no matter what she did, was devastating beyond words and brought her mind collapsing down into nothingness. After all, there was nothing left to hope for. Somehow, through the void of darkness, she heard something. A faint echo of a familiar voice, a comforting presence in a time of need. Kasumi, can you hear me? Mother? Her long-dormant mind slowly stirred, straining to hear the faint voice, so near yet oh so far away. Mother, is that you? She felt the gentle caress of a warm hand across her brow, and a soothing voice drifting softly along. Through the haze of her mind, she heard the words that Mother once told her, words of comfort in times of distress. And somewhere in Kaeri's mind, she remembered the last story. She didn't like hospitals. They were so solemn and quiet, and her mother had been stuck in one for weeks now, and she didn't understand why Mother hadn't come home yet. Kasumi, said her mother, for she was still Kasumi in that time. "Come here, dear mother." Kasumi found herself at a loss for words, as the feeling of impending death in the air robbed her of her voice. "Kasumi," said her mother, in a voice far too weak and far too tired, "you remember all the stories I used to tell you?" "Why, yes, mother." Mother managed a weak, but still comforting smile as she took Kasumi's hand in hers. "I know times have been hard on you lately, dear, and I'm sorry I couldn't be there for you. There's one more story, my dear Kasumi, that I must tell." Kasumi nodded slowly, and then her mother told the last story. Once upon a time in ancient Japan, when a trip between cities took days, there was a man and his wife. They lived in a remote part of Japan, and were blessed with a little girl who was sweet and good and dutiful. One day, the man was called away on business to faraway Kyoto. Before he went, he told his daughter that if she were good and dutiful to her mother, he would bring her back a present she would prize very highly. He kissed his wife, and took his leave, as mother and daughter watched him go. Weeks passed, and the mother and daughter kept the cottage clean, and played games and laughed with each other, while missing the good man very much. At last he returned to his home, and after his wife and child had taken off his large hat and sandals, he sat down upon the white mats and opened a bamboo basket, watching the eager gaze of his little child. He took out a wonderful doll and a lacquer box of cakes and put them into her outstretched hands. The daughter laughed and cried for joy, and the good wife smiled at her husband. The man unwrapped gift, and bade her to be careful with it. The good wife unwrapped the gift, and exclaimed in surprise, for in it, there was an object with a human face looking out at her. Its convex surface shone brightly, while upon its back, there was a design of pine trees and storks. The good man's wife had never seen a mirror before, and on gazing into it she was under the impression that another woman looked out upon her as she gazed with growing wonder. Her husband laughed, and explained what the object was, and bade her to take great care of the mirror, and they were happy for many more years. But all good things come to an end. One day, the woman became very ill. Just before she died, she called to her little daughter, and said, "Dear child, when I am dead, take care of your father. One day, your father will remarry. I want you to love your new mother as much as you love me." "Don't talk like that, mother. You will get better," the daughter cried. The mother shook her head. "I must leave you." "But," and here she drew out a wrapped object, and bade her daughter to unwrap it. "Why, that is the mirror father got when he went to Kyoto many years ago." The girl said, "Yes, I know you will miss me when I have left you. But take this mirror, and when you feel most lonely, look into it and you will always see me. I may not talk, but I will be there for you." And with these words, the mother sighed, and passed away. After mourning the loss of his good wife, in due time the man married again. His new wife was not kind at all to her stepdaughter, and often the daughter found herself lonely, and missing her mother. And then one day, she remembered her mother's words, and drew out the mirror in the privacy of her room. And lo, her mother looked out at her from the mirror's surface. Not the sickly pain face of her dying days, but the young and beautiful beloved face. After that, whenever her stepmother's unkindness grew too much for her, the daughter would retreat into her room and gaze into the mirror. And in this manner, she was able to remain calm and gentle and good-natured, for her mother's smile and gentle look reassured her. One day the girl's stepmother chanced to see her crouching in a corner over an object she could not quite see, murmuring to herself. This ignorant woman, who detested the child and believed that her stepdaughter detested her in return, was frightened, for she thought that the girl was performing some strange magical art perhaps making an image and sticking pins into it. Full of these notions, the stepmother went to her husband and told him that his wicked child was doing her best to kill her by witchcraft. When the good man had listened to this incredible tale, he went straight to his daughter's room. The good man knew that there was friction between his loving daughter and his wife, and felt that time would work it out, but he thought it wise to talk to his loving little girl. He had meant to be gentle, but when the girl saw him, she slipped an object into her sleeve. For the first time her doting father grew angry, and he feared that there was, after all, truth in what his wife had told him, and he repeated her tale forthwith. When his daughter had heard this unjust accusation, she was amazed at her father's words, and she told him that she loved him far too well ever to attempt or wish to kill his wife, who she knew was dear to him. "What have you hidden in your sleeve, then?" said her father, only half convinced and still much puzzled over his daughter's strange behavior. Then the daughter took out the object. "The mirror you gave my mother, and which she on her deathbed gave to me. Every time I look into its shining surface, I see the face of my dear mother, young and beautiful. When my heart aches and oh, it has ached so much lately I take out the mirror, and mother's face, with her sweet, kind smile, brings me peace, and helps me to bear hard words and cross looks." And the man did not understand, so his daughter took out the mirror, and looked at it. And then she looked up at her father with a simple, innocent, joyful expression. "Look, father. Do you see mother?" And the man looked, and understanding broke out on his face. "Oh, how wise your mother was! Like two halves of a melon, you and your mother shared the same face, and thus, in your innocence, you had grown up to be the loving person your mother was." And he hugged his daughter, and loved her more for her filial piety. The girl's stepmother, who had snuck up and listened at the doorway, suddenly burst in, crying and kowtowing to her stepdaughter. "I did not know. I did not know. I had thought that you hated me, and so I, in turn, hated you. But having heard the tale of you and your mother, I am ashamed. From this day forth, I will cast out my old heart, and put in a new one, and love you as my daughter, and I hope you will love me as you loved your mother." And she cried, and this dutiful daughter, who believed she had seen her mother's face in the mirror, forgave her stepmother. From then on, her home was again a happy one, and the family was never troubled again. There was a moment of silence as Kasumi held her mother's hand like a lifeline. She never wanted to let go. Never, not ever. It wasn't fair. "Kasumi," said her mother gently, "do you understand what I'm trying to say?" "Why, yes, mother, I do." Miyabi paused in her storytelling as she saw, at last, the first sign of life from her comatose aunt. A single tear. Miyabi clasped her aunt's hand tightly. "Auntie Kasumi?" A voice answered. "No. Not Kasumi. Kaeri." Hello? Radiko Hibiki wasn't quite sure what was going on. The last thing he remembered clearly was falling down on the road. The details were murky, but there was definitely a road and he definitely hit it face first. From that point, his memories were murky to the point of being unreliable. Something about clown noses and flames, but that didn't seem right. As to where he was now, it was a bed, in very cramped quarters, surrounded by lots of medical equipment. It seemed to be an ambulance. Slowly, he stood up, and immediately noticed something was wrong. There was something on his nose and one of his arms was wrapped in bandages. What, he wondered, just happened? With that in mind, he opened the door. And then he quickly closed it again as the wail of sirens and the sight of a hospital blaze greeted him. Oh, so that's what happened. Oh boy. And then, without warning, the ambulance roared to life, sirens wailing, and sped away. HK. White Radical made his way to the front of the ambulance, where two very stressed medics Saturday. Hello? He asked nervously. Both of the medics groaned. "I knew we forgot something," said one of them. "Sorry about this, sir," said the other to Radico. "But we've got an emergency call to get to and we can't turn back now. Just, sit back and relax. I think we've got a few magazines there for you to kill time with." Radico blinked. "Oh, okay." Kaeri slowly sat up, looking up, a dull, impassive expression on her face. She slowly tilted her head to look at an anxious Miyabi. "Auntie Kaeri?" There was no response. "Auntie Kaeri? Are you okay?" A pause for thought, then Kaeri slowly shook her head, remaining sullen. Miyabi sat down nervously next to Kaeri. She reached out to touch her aunt's hand. Kaeri flinched, backing away. Miyabi let go quickly, then looked down. "I'm sorry, Auntie." And she stood up quickly, leaving the room. Outside the room, Miyabi sighed. Great. Just great. Ryo Saotome was going to pay for this. But until she came back. "Auntie, are you hungry?" Kaeri shook her head. Miyabi frowned. "You haven't had anything since you came here. Are you sure?" With that eerily blank look on still haunting her face, Kaeri nodded. With a sigh, Miyabi walked quietly out the door, closing it slowly on her way out. A moment later, she peeked back into the room. "Tell you what, I'll just bring you a little something. Just in case, you know." Kaeri didn't respond. "Right. Back in a while." Asterisk 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 asterisk. Entering the kitchen, Miyabi was greeted with awkward silence. Kasumi was there, chopping vegetables and watching over boiling pots as she prepared the next meal. However, she just didn't seem herself. "Auntie Kasumi, are you okay?" Kasumi twitched, as if startled, then turned to Miyabi with a warm smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "I'm fine, Miyabi-chan. You, okay, I guess. And how is?" Kasumi's expression wavered for a moment. "How is our guest?" "She's okay, I guess. I'm gonna bring some food to her. I don't think she's eaten anything at all yet." Kasumi nodded. "That's nice." And then the eldest Tendo resumed chopping vegetables. Chop 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 chop. Miyabi looked at Kasumi with concern. She couldn't imagine how her auntie felt, seeing a deranged, scarred version of herself. Whatever she was feeling, Miyabi hoped she could handle it, because she'd be busy enough with Kaeri. Coming to herself, Miyabi gathered some fruit, chips, and other miscellaneous snacks, along with a canned drink, placed them all neatly on a tray, and carried it out. And then her grandfather walked by. "Ah, Miyabi-chan, how thoughtful of you." With speed born of being a horrible glutton, Ranma reached for the food on the tray. With speed born of eating countless meals with Ranma and Ranma, Miyabi pulled the tray out from his reach. "Grandfather, no. This is for Auntie Kaeri." "Who?" "The other Kasumi, the one that, you know." Ranma's expression turned very solemn. "Oh, I see. Very good, granddaughter. Tending to the weak is a martial artist's duty. Go on, dear." "Thanks, Grandpa." As Miyabi walked away, Ranma shook his head. The worlds were mysterious places indeed. What kind of world would produce such a shattered version of their dear Kasumi? Ah, well, the mysteries of life. He watched his granddaughter depart upstairs, then went over to the old reliable shogi board to kill some time with soon. Ready to face defeat again, Soon Tendo, in full glistening and sharp samurai armor, was not what he was expecting. "Hello, Saotome." The metal scraped and whined as Soon took a sat at the shogi board. "Shall we?" Sure. Last time I went first, I believe. So you're up today." Ranma nodded. He moved a piece. Soon studied the move carefully. Then he asterisk scrapes asterisk groan asterisk squeak asterisk scrapes asterisk moved a piece. Ranma took 5 seconds to recover, then another minute to contemplate his next step. And then he moved another piece. Soon nodded approvingly, as if seeing wisdom in Ranma's strategy. He then took a full minute to contemplate the next step. Then he asterisk G-R-E-N-K asterisk S-E-R-U-O-N-K-K asterisk G-R-E-N-K asterisk S-E-R-R-K asterisk moved another piece. Ranma blinked and shook his head, trying to stop the world from reverberating. Tendo, my friend, may I ask a question? What is it, Saotome? Why do you have that armor on? Saotome. That girl. That other Kasumi. Before tonight I had thought it impossible that such harm could befall my first child. Now I know the world is in fact a far more dangerous place, and so long as Kasumi is under my roof I shall never allow her to suffer such a fate. Ranma nodded approvingly. Very noble, Tendo. Akan walked into the room at this time, looking puzzled. Daddy? Mr. Saotome? Did you hear that noise? Soon turned asterisk S-E-R-E-A-C-H asterisk S-E-R-O-N-K asterisk W-H-R-R asterisk S-E-R-E-K asterisk to face her youngest daughter. What noise, Akan? After her ears finally stabilized, Akan sighed. Never mind. She turned to walk away, muttering something about crazy parents, then paused. Say, have any of you seen Hibiki? Ranma shook his head. Not I, probably out with her friends, said Soon. You know Muhoshin Island, asterisk 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 meanwhile, in Ethiopia. Hibiki sighed in relief, watching the ground zoom by and below her. She was currently passenger in a VTOL combat jet she'd come into possession of after a long and complicated series of transactions that made even her head spin. At long last, back to Japan. It was a real experience, these past few days, but she'd survived. Oh yes, through thick and thin, through endless negotiations, corrupt government officials, corrupt rebels, and noisy tourists, she'd survived and come out on top. And in a matter of hours, she'd return home triumphant. Asterisk boom asterisk or not. What was that? She yelled to the pilot. Rebel gunfire, Miss Tendo. They took out one of our engines. And as her newly acquired VTOL plane spiraled back down to Earth, Hibiki cursed and cursed and cursed and cursed. And, again, she swore vengeance on Radiko Hibiki. Asterisk 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 night and day came and went, and for the second day in a row, Ryo Saotome had not come back. Miyabi felt a bit of worry but a large amount of irritation. Kaeri needed to be someplace more peaceful, where she'd belong, and not this place. Kaeri didn't belong there, and neither did Miyabi. Until then, the future Saotome tried to make life as comfortable as possible for them both. Good morning. Miyabi carried the tray laden with breakfast items to Kaeri's side. The former Kasumi acknowledged Miyabi with a glance, but nothing more. Feeling any better? Asked Miyabi softly. Kaeri shook her head. Negative. Don't you want any breakfast? Again, Kaeri shook her head. Won't you at least give it a try? I made it myself, you know. She gave Kaeri a reassuring smile. No response. Just a little. For me. Please. No response. Again. Kaeri merely looked blankly at the wall. With a sigh, Miyabi took a seat on the floor, opposite of Kaeri, and rested her hand in her head. What to do to get her to talk? HRM. Tell you what, said Miyabi. I'll tell you all about me, then you tell me all about you, okay? That only seems fair, Northeast. The underwhelming response was not inspiring. I'll take that as a yes. Miyabi shifted for a moment, settling down to tell her tale. With a deep breath, she began. Or, she was about to, when she realized she'd forgotten something very basic. Oh, I never introduced myself, she said with much embarrassment. I'm Ryo Saotome. Sorry I didn't say so earlier, but I guess I was just kinda caught up in things. Kaeri's gaze shifted towards her, until she was looking directly into Miyabi's. The girl found the dead stare a bit unnerving, but pressed on and told her tale. Ranma and Akan, they're my parents. I'm told I have a lot of them in me. I dunno. Grown-ups say that a lot about kids. Miyabi shrugged. I was born, will be born, in a few years. I'm the first baby they had. My little brother was born a few years later, but that's another story. They say I was born kicking and screaming, and it haven't stopped since. Miyabi thought about how that sounded, then laughed. No, I'm not bad like that. I guess I'm just a little stubborn sometimes. Her face brightened, a proud grin making its way to her lips. And I'm good at martial arts. I'm the heir to the Tendo Dojo, and proud of it. Father says I'm every bit as good as he was, and I've heard how good he was, so hearing that from him means a lot to me. Miyabi glanced quickly, checking on Kaeri's expression. Was that a faint smile she saw flickering? Maybe this was working. She thought of what to say next, then had a profound insight on her life situation. I just realized, if I'm the heir, they're probably gonna try to engage me to someone. I just hope mother and father don't make the same mistakes grandfather made. She frowned and bit a nail. Say, why Tasik, they don't necessarily need any to act children to get an heir. They could always engage Masato Suko. Yeah, that's a plan. She grinned proudly, feeling good about her plan. Oh, that's right, you don't know them. Maso is my brother, and Suko is Uncle Ryugi and Auntie Yukai's daughter. Suko's okay, but Maso's a brat. You used to babysit us a lot, I remember. You always told me I was such a tomboy, just like Mum was when she was a kid. Seeing her now, I still don't know what they're talking about. Do you? She looked at Kaeri curiously. No response. However, she was either imagining things or Kaeri actually looked like she was listening. Well, Miyabi hesitated, then frowned. I'm rambling, aren't I? Kaeri blinked. It was better than nothing. Well, hold on. Lemme think of something. Miyabi hummed for a bit, eyes rolled upward, deep in thought. Ah, I know. I remember when you taught me to cook. That seemed like a good place to start. She remembered it well, and it involved Antiki. Kusu. Her. Well, you didn't start teaching me until Mom and Dad asked you to. I guess it was because of the way I started cooking. Asterisk 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 asterisk. It was 6 in the morning and Miyabi was hungry. Mommy and Daddy were still asleep. Grandpa Soon was still asleep. Grandpa Panda was still asleep. Miyabi was very hungry. Being the independent sort, much like her mother, Miyabi decided that making her own breakfast should be just fine. Obviously, the really neat stuff was too hard for her. But that instant ramen, now that looked easy. Hot water, noodles, mix. Right. Now how did Mom heat water? Asterisk 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 asterisk. Dear, what's that sound? Ranma yawned and groaned. NNNG, more sleep. Will you go check? Right, okay, hold on. And so Ryo Saotome, martial artist, trudged down half asleep through his abode. He may have been half asleep, but he was still an alert martial artist. The sound of metal clanging on metal could be heard from the kitchen. A burglar? He carefully made his way to the kitchen, silently, slowly. Hi, Daddy. Miyabi-chan. Ranma looked around the kitchen, puzzled. What's going on? Cooking breakfast. Oh, thought Ranma, that would explain the bits of dry ramen splattered on the floor, along with the bowl full of smashed up ramen bits. Instant ramen, Miyabi-chan. Millimeters HM, said the girl, nodding enthusiastically. The sound of the microwave humming along got Ranma's attention. He looked inside, where a cup of water was already steaming. Ranma looked at the heating time. 999 minutes, 32 seconds. Oh boy. Ranma chuckled. Just like your mom. And what do you mean by that? Asked Han's voice. Nothing, love. Asterisk 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 asterisk. Kaeri blinked, again, but otherwise didn't react much. Miyabi didn't notice, too wrapped up in her own tale. After that, they kinda told the whole family. Everyone laughed about it, which made me kinda confused. But you took me seriously. Asterisk 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 asterisk. With Ranma and Akan gone on yet another adventure, Miyabi found herself in Auntie Kasumi's care once more. The little girl didn't mind much, since Auntie Kasumi was nice. Miyabi-chan, I heard you were trying to learn how to cook. Miyabi nodded. But Daddy won't let me unless him Mom is watching. Kasumi smiled and ruffled the girl's hair. That's good, Miyabi-chan. You know, I learned how to cook at your age. That seemed to get Miyabi's attention. You did? Kasumi smiled wistfully. Millimeters HM. I tried on my own, just like you, but I accidentally started a fire. Miyabi gasped. Did the house burn down? The eldest Tendo daughter laughed. Oh, no, everything was okay. But after that, Mother taught me how to cook. Ooh. Kasumi appeared contemplative for a moment, then knelt down to be at eye level with Miyabi. Miyabi-chan, do you want me to help you learn how to cook? The little girl's eyes widened. You would? I'd love to. Yai. Now, you'll have to promise to do exactly what I say. Hi. Now, the first thing Mother taught me is how to boil water. Water? How about okonomiyaki? First things first, Miyabi-chan. You have to learn the basics before you try bigger things. Okay. ****************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************** don't know if I ever will be, but I'm told that I'm a better cook than Mom was when she was my age. She stretched and yawned, feeling the effects of sitting in one position for too long. I'm gonna go take a quick jog around the neighborhood, okay? I'll be back later. Kaeri blinked, which wasn't much more than she'd been doing before. With a sigh, Miyabi rose and went to the door. She paused, however, when she heard the faintest of sounds, a few softly spoken words from the silent Kaeri. Come back. Miyabi stared at Kaeri in surprise, though Kaeri was still staring at the wall across from her. Well, she wasn't normal, but progress was progress. As her father once told her, one step at a time. Don't worry, Auntie. I will. I promise. Asterisk 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 as promised. Miyabi had returned later that day and told more stories of her eventful youth. She spoke of birthdays and picnics, rivalries and friendships, a youth spent amongst some of the most formidable martial artists in the world. And as she spun her tales, Kaeri listened. Silently, as she listened to the girl, her eyes became just a little less haunted, her gaze a little less blank, and a little more human. However, Kaeri still remained mostly silent, except for the occasional no, yes, I, and other monosyllable words. There was one exception. Come back. Two words spoken with a certain sadness and need. Whenever it appeared Miyabi would leave the room. The girl would always assure her that she'd return, and when she did she thought she sensed relief from the scarred and shattered woman that was once Kasumi Tendo. 3 days passed in this manner, and Miyabi found them to be more pleasant than any time spent with her parents and grandparents so far. Greater than from Kaeri, there was no nagging, no arguing, no denial. She listened, and maybe, Miyabi admitted it might have been wishful thinking on her part, maybe she cared. However, it wasn't until the 4th day that there was a change. Asterisk 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 asterisk. So the first time I tried making sauce for the egg fooing, I thought it'd be easy, said Miyabi. I mean, gravy is just water, seasonings, and flour, right? Cornstarch, mumbled Kaeri. Yeah, cornstarch, beef stock, salt, continued Kaeri. Miyabi stared at Kaeri, surprised. This was more words than she'd ever said before in a row. She watched Kaeri intently, waiting to see if she would open up further. She didn't disappoint. Use the saucepan, medium heat. Stir and mix. Be sure not to leave any lumps, until thick and bubbly. Auntie, you're talking. Kaeri nodded. Good cooking, she said in a hoarse voice, is important. It was, admittedly, a bit of a letdown. But at least she was talking. Go on, said Kaeri. Huh? Your story. Oh. Miyabi laughed nervously and scratched the back of her head. Well, anyway, I mixed beef stock, flour, and water, then put it in the microwave. A minute later, I got a muffin. A muffin? Asked Kaeri. Yeah, it was neat. Firm on the outside with a gooey, salty middle. Daddy called it a Chinese muffin. Kaeri smiled. Asterisk 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 asterisk. What happened? Why you? Miyabi searched for the words, not entirely sure how to put the question. Why? Who hurt you? Kaeri looked away, closing her eyes. Miyabi could feel her hand trembling, and held it more firmly. It's okay, you don't have to. Knives, Kaeri whispered. They used knives and needles. Her fingers, those that remained, clamped tightly around Miyabi's hand. Auntie, they killed them. All of them. Akan, Nebiki, Ranma, Daddy, all of them dead. But they didn't kill me. Kaeri's voice went from whisper to shriek in an instant, and Miyabi shrank away from the fires that suddenly danced behind her eyes. Killed them. Left me all alone. All alone. The shriek faded into choking half-sobs, and Miyabi began to open her mouth, a comforting phrase floating up through her horrified mind. But I wouldn't let them. No, I wouldn't. The mirror. I took the mirror, and I went back, and I found them, and I took the bomb that killed them, and I found the monsters and they hurt. It doesn't matter, I don't matter, the work is everything. But they hurt me. Auntie, please, it's okay. And there's more Akans and Nebikis and they die and I can't save them all. Kaeri mumbled, a hurt, confused look moving over her scarred face. They can't die. They're all I've ever had. It's all my fault. My fault. Dropping her face into her maimed hands, she wept. Miyabi tightly hugged her, tears running down her own cheeks. Now, at least, she knew what had happened. She remembered her own tears at seeing this alternate version of her parents constantly fighting. How much worse, then, must it have been for Kaeri? Her real family killed, alternate families apparently dead as well. Physical torture, emotional torture, survivors killed, and the loss of everything she had built her life around. The only wonder, Miyabi thought sadly, was that she was as relatively sane as she was. SSSH. SSSH. It's okay. All gone. All dead. Let me tell you about my world again. Mom and Dad were so pleased when the Hibikis had their first child. Burned to ashes. There was a big celebration. Dead. All dead. Asterisk 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 asterisk. Half an hour later, Miyabi emerged, her legs a little unsteady. Kaeri was asleep, or dozing, or just more unresponsive than usual. It was hard to tell. Sometimes stories of her world seemed to help. Apparently she must have grown up in a virtual paradise by the standards of the universes Kaeri had seen, as if some kindly power had watched over Miyabi and her extended family, giving them happiness. The scarred Tendo has rambled on for a good 15 minutes, sometimes about knives and needles and stoves, and sometimes about surreal-sounding lands, but mostly the same mournful lament that they were all dead. It did give Miyabi a bit of a queasy feeling. Intellectually she supposed that there were worlds where her parents died, or she died. But there was a big difference between mental supposition and actually seeing it happen. A very big difference. Possibly the difference between madness and sanity. Asterisk 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 even with someone like Kaeri, there were only so many times one could go over the same family gossip and recipes. The scarred woman had a blissful expression on her face. She looked like she could go on hearing about Mum and Dad all day long. But Miyabi felt that she'd be the one lying on a couch soon if she didn't change the subject. So she did. And after that we had to bathe my brother in alcohol to clean it all off. Kaeri. A muffled HRMPH came from the woman. Not quite a yes, but it was a response. Have I ever told you about how I got here? Kaeri shook her head ever so slightly, bit her lip and stuck her right hand in the crack between the seat and back cushions. Miyabi decided to risk it, and began to narrate the adventures of Ryo Saotome and the Locketers, the G-rated version. She could tell when her story was getting too troublesome for her audience, because her eyebrows would knot themselves up and she'd reach deeper into the sofa crack. Whenever that happened, she'd backtrack a bit, skip over events, or patch up the narrative with attractive little white lies. And then Rab poked me with an A. With his finger, to check for bruises. Hey, wait. Where are you going? It's so lovely. Miyabi. Kaeri stood up slowly and carefully, using the sofa's armrests as supports. I'll just be a minute. I need to. She plonked at the washroom. Need help? Kaeri shook her head. Miyabi sat on the edge of the sofa and watched her as she walked. She stumbled a few times, but never actually fell. The washroom door opened, then shut with a click. Miyabi looked at the sofa, and he'd lain there so long that there was a slight Kaeri-shaped depression on the cushions, and a distortion where she'd stuck her hand between the cushions. What'd she been doing that for, anyway? She reached in. Was that a broomstick? That made sense. For Auntie, a mop would be as good as a security blanket. But it was so cold and hard, and it must be carved. She grabbed the rug and yanked it out. Nope. Definitely not a broomstick. Ma. A flush from the washroom. Miyabi didn't know what it was that she was holding, but she guessed that anything with that kind of symbol on it couldn't be entirely harmless. On an impulse, she stuck it in the broom closet. Kaeri stepped out of the bathroom only moments after she'd closed the door. All done? A small nod. Her mouth was a straight line, neither happy nor sad. Yeah, so I was telling you about Rat and his BL. His bruise test, wasn't I? Kaeri laid herself back on the sofa and closed her eyes. As Miyabi went on with her story, her cheekbones rose slightly, and one could almost say she smiled. And then that pervert of a half-brother of mine jumps in, shouting, "It's gone." Yeah, but how did you, Auntie? It's gone. Kaeri's voice and body were shaking. She'd stood up and was running her hand along the entire length of the sofa crack. "What's gone?" asked Miyabi. Maybe now she'd be able to figure out why Auntie carried something that nasty looking around. "It's my... Her Adam's apple rose and fell. She stopped shaking. It wasn't gradual, it was an abrupt stop. She was repressing it. "It's nothing," she said. "Go on with your story." Miyabi spoke, but her audience was no longer listening. Asterisk 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 asterisk. The sirens of the ambulance blared as it sped through the night. In the back of it, a very bored Ryo Saotome thumbed through a dog-eared copy of Shonen Sunday while wedged between a stretcher and a machine that went ping, and wondered, somewhere in the drugged and microchip-affected recesses of his brain, just how long it was supposed to take to get to an emergency call. At least he had plenty of entertainment for the trip. Ryo thanked his medical training and injected another dose of morphine into his IV. It made the manga a lot more interesting. Up front, Taki and Koji tried to contact the hospital by radio to find out the address of the emergency they were supposed to be attending to. As said hospital was last seen busily burning to the ground, there was little success. "I thought you remembered the address," Taki shouted. "I thought you did," Koji replied. "Oh, sure, blame me for it. You're the one who got us into the middle of that desert. At least the pyramids were nice. And don't tell me you didn't like the camel." Taki considered this, and nodded. The camel was cute. But since when are there pyramids in Tokyo? "I dunno. Since when is there a rainforest? Small brown guys with blowguns and colonies full of fat people wearing fur hats?" "Good point." A pause. "Taki? Yes? Do you think our patient's still alive? How long's it been?" "Dunno. My watch got Friday'd right about when we passed that flag stuck in the snow." "Mine too." A pause. "Koji? Yes? Do you think we're still alive?" "What do you mean?" "Well, all the different people, and places and stuff. We could be on the highway to the heavens, you know. Died, and are going through the places where all the other dead folk live while searching for our own. Koji scratched his chin. Could be. Hey, look. There's a dead man now." Later, both would claim the other was driving when they hit the boy with the umbrella. In truth, it was not so much they hit him as he hit them. Ryuga simply wasn't paying attention. All his thoughts for the last while had been about great-grandsons from the future, getting married to Yukainu, and a whole bushel and a peck of other topics too diverse to enter into at this point. So when he looked up in the middle of the formerly empty intersection in a dilapidated section of the harbor district filled with empty warehouses, and saw the ambulance, sirens blazing, bearing down on him, he did what came naturally. He hit it with his umbrella. The front of the vehicle crumpled into a variety of interesting shapes around the invincible red bamboo frame. Ryuga held his arm rigid, thinking he could stop the ambulance as if it were simply a charging wild boar. As it turned out, however, it didn't end up stopping until reached out and put his other hand on the bumper. He had to dig his feet into. Taki and Koji looked out at the lost boy, who was dressed very much like the one in the back of the ambulance. Their attention was somewhat distracted by the jagged pieces of metal which had entered the cab, miraculously missing any vital or non-vital parts of their body when Ryuga had hit the ambulance. "Ooh," said Koji. "Millimeters," said Taki. The siren gave a last piercing wail, and died out. Ryuga came over and knocked on the driver's side window with his umbrella. Koji or Taki, it was never made really clear who had been driving, rolled it down. "Watch," Ryuga said. "Where you are going, please." He casually tossed the front bumper of the ambulance to the road and walked away. Koji looked to Taki. Coffee break. Coffee break. Considering they were going to lose their jobs, and weren't entirely sure that they were alive to go back to them should they miraculously keep them, it wasn't too big a deal to them at that point. The pair absconded from the ruined ambulance and walked off in search of some place entirely absent from people capable of stopping speeding ambulances using umbrellas and their bare hands. "Looks like we bumped into the soldiers section. Let's go try to find the Furry Bunny Heaven. Or the Playboy Bunny Heaven." "Good thinking, Koji." In the back of the ambulance, Rat yanked out the IV feed and worked to untangle himself from the defibrillator pads, managing to receive only 5 large jolts of electricity in the process that he'd gotten worked into when Ryuga had stopped the ambulance. With a hard shove, he pushed open the doors and staggered out onto the street to see a familiar figure with bandana and umbrella heading away around the corner. "Hey! Great-Granddad! Wait up!" Ryuga turned and looked at Rat, his umbrella resting lightly on one shoulder. "Oh, hiya, Radico. How's it going?" "Not good," Radico said. For some reason, he giggled. The plan. He shook his finger at Ryuga. "The plan, you see, is not unfolding quite as well as was hoped. Another manic titter escaped him. You see, there are _powerful forces _conspiring against me." Ryuga blinked as his future descendant grabbed him by the shoulders in a death grip. "They want to see me wiped from the face of the earth, great-grandfather." A pat on the back did little to calm Radico down. Who?" Ryuga asked after a hesitant moment. "They." Radico snarled. They're all against me. Every one of them. Ryuga searched for something great-grandfatherly to say. He fixed upon the splint and bandage upon Rat's nose. Who did that to you? Radiko went from manic to depressive in an eye blink. One of them underscore, he said glumly. Who? Miyabi, he muttered. Ranma's little spawn. Is it not enough that you torment my king and I, Saotome? Ryuga said mournfully. Must your descendants do the same? There's only one thing to do, of course, Radiko said, rubbing his hands together gleefully. Get them first. Get them all. Every single one. Ranma first. Ooh. Ryuga felt distinctly uncomfortable suddenly. Talk and action were two different things, and Radiko sounded frighteningly serious. The lost boy might himself have shouted Ranma, prepare to die any number of times, but he'd never actually carried through. Why Ranma? I mean, well, he has admittedly made your life a living hell, just like mine, and, no, it's not that. Radiko let out another giggle. Then what? It is probably good to note for readers at this moment that Rat is suffering from a slight concussion from being run over by an ambulance after falling face first into concrete from a great height. The lingering effects of enough morphine to color horse see the brain twigglings. The anocorpopium chip in his head. The impromptu electroshock therapy from the defibrillator pads. A mild case of genetically inherited stupidity. Let us now step back into the action as if we had never left it. Well, Radiko explained with all the clinical detachment of a doctor, describing how the progress of a patient's terminal cancer had reached their brain and would soon be causing them to be reduced to a pathetic grueling heap of humanity. Ranma has to die, you see. When Ranma dies, Akan will commit suicide after murdering Hako's eyes. After that, you and Yukayo will get married. Yukayo will get consigned to a mental institution, and you'll end up sleeping with Nebiki. Then Nebiki will accidentally kill Kasumi while blowing up the Tendo house. Then she'll kill herself too. He scratched his head, and, no, wait. Kasumi doesn't die right away. Her daughter kills her by lethal injection as she lies like a vegetable in a hospital bed. And Dr. Tofu goes insane, I think. Ryuga stared. So you see, Radiko concluded. Ranma's got to die so everyone else will either die, go insane, or suffer horribly. Except Kuno, I guess. He kinda gets to rule the world. Wanna help out? I can. Dead? Ryuga murmured. Yeah, Radiko said, and being as only someone completely and utterly unaware of the true gravity of a situation can. And it's also _ can come into existence. Ain't it great? Ryuga thought for a split second, and then quite calmly and efficiently broke Radiko's nose again. Miyabi moved the staff into her room the moment she had a chance, and since then, Kaeri had seemed more at peace. There was less trembling, less shifting of eyes. She'd tried to go look for it once or twice, but Miyabi had managed to stop that. Now she just lay back and listened to her gossip and asked unbothered and, Miyabi-chan, come back. You haven't finished your story. I've told it to you 100 times. Geez, they're just my parents. It's not like they're some movie stars or something. But you told me. Look, I have a headache, my legs are cramped and I'm sick of spending all my days telling my life story to you hoping that maybe, just maybe you'll actually get up and do something. Was she crying? Cripes, talk about frail. Stop that. I'm just going out for a walk, okay? Why don't you just go talk to yourself, or something? She's in the kitchen. But the stairs. I thought you were. I'm going out the window. Hey, I'm my father's daughter, right? If Kaeri answered, Miyabi didn't hear it. Asterisk 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 night. The Tendo household was wrapped in darkness as it came, eventually surrendering to the darkness one room at a time as the people of the household went to sleep. Not all of them rested. In the darkness, Kaeri slowly crept through the house. Sometimes she would stumble, but always she would remain silent. Through empty halls she crept, her footfalls soft against the wooden floors, down the stairs, to the dining room. After peeking into the room to make sure it was empty, she entered the room crawling on hands and knees. She looked under the television, under the furniture, underneath anything that could be moved. And then she moved to the kitchen and did it again, searching through cabinets, shelves and cupboards. After a few minutes of this, she sighed and moved on to the tea room, relentlessly searching through there in the same obsessive and driven manner. After every room, her eyes grew wilder, more desperate, her movement less subtle, more noisy. It had to be here, she whispered to herself. It simply had to. She entered the dojo, though this time she entered caring not about stealth at all. Kaeri tossed aside training equipment carelessly in her search, her hands beginning to shake. She bit back a scream of frustration after more minutes of searching bore no fruit. Kaeri ran outside, dropping to her knees and crawling in the dirt, not caring that her clothes became filthy in the process. Her hands sifted through dirt and grass, seeking relentlessly. 10 minutes later, she emerged from underneath the dojo, a wild and desperate look in her eyes. She wandered to the middle of the courtyard, trembling, then saw the pond. She ran to the pond, kneeling at its edge. She reached in with both hands, first searching slowly, then frantically, splashing the waters to a froth. A moment later, she entered the pond entirely and dove underneath, groping blindly in the dark waters. She rose for air, gasping, then dove down and searched again. Where is it? Her mind screamed. She crawled out of the pond, dripping wet and trembling badly now, and stared at the cloudy skies above, wet, smeared with dirt, trembling. Where could it have gone? Asterisk 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 asterisk. The ships of many nations dock at the harbors of Tokyo. Great tankers, massive transport ships, importers of illegal arms. Their crews drink in the bars near the harbor, and occasionally fight with each other. Sometimes, they even go to sleep in the cabins and quarters of the great ships. The ships bob slowly at the docks, rocked by the subtle motions of the waves. The crews slumber, soothed by the rhythms of the sea, dreaming dreams of far-off homelands, perhaps of families left behind. When the sun rises, some of them will leave the shelter of the harbor and sail out across the ocean to other ports. The lives of seamen are short and fast-paced. They spend their entire existence running with the tide, trying to get up a nest egg. Most of them will die unfulfilled. Us, the seamen, need their rest. Ache. Verdante skies. We're schlafen higher. Our schlock. They're not getting it tonight. Collins. Quabos. Bobos. Estudent and dormir. Schweigen sighs. As they watch sleepily from the decks of their ships, a dockside warehouse. It is probably an unnecessary detail to tell the reader that it was used to store insulin for distribution to needy diabetics, but we'll do it anyway. Goes up in a cacophonous explosion of yellow light. Quianatis malditorodo. Els volius a Carla Muger. Faintly, over the sounds of things blowing up, someone can be heard screaming. Core. Shut the bloody hell up, you lot. Screaming in mortal terror. Silence. Who's at sign part debates? There is another voice too. It is screaming in rage. What it is screaming is this, or agikohidiki. Prepare to die. Asterisk 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 asterisk. Miyabi lay flat against the floor, frantically running her arm under her sleeping mat. It's Gioan. She stopped herself before she brought the whole house to the door with her shouting. Where was it? Could Kaeri have stolen it from her? Maybe Ryo had popped in and her fingers touched the cold carvings on the staff, and she sighed with relief. Miyabi gently slid it from under the mat. She could have lifted her bed, but the staff liked the dark, and it wouldn't be nice to bring in all that light all of a sudden, without warning it or anything. Geez. While she was pampering broomsticks, she used the staff to prop herself up and admired the figures carved on it. At first she'd thought they might be stylized animals or people, but now when she squinted at them, they almost seemed like words, like stories, or maybe laws. Every time she thought she understood them, her mind would move to something else. Miyabi ran her hand along the staff's length. She had a vague feeling that if she only fingered the symbols for long enough, the meanings would come to her head, like blind people and Braille. All that it gave her was a rush. But that was enough. She smiled. Sorry for talking you out like this. I just had to check on you, you know. Well, now I'll put you back. I have to go for a walk. Miyabi lifted the edge of the mat and replaced the staff beneath it. Before I leave, she said, still holding a corner up, if Kaeri or either of the Ryos comes, you just stay put, you hear? I'll be right back. It was silly, she knew, but it almost felt as if the staff understood her. Asterisk 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 feet. Do your stuff, Radico commanded. The feet did. Behind him, the warehouse collapsed in on itself in a pile of broken timber and rended metal. The attack had been aimed at the precise point where Radag landed after his great-grandfather broke his nose again with a perfectly placed blow of his fist. The searing beam of yellow light had torn through the wall, the warehouse interior, and the opposite wall. All the windows of the dockside warehouse had blown out from the resulting shockwave, spraying the streets with glinting patterns of glass. Blood flowed copiously down Rat's chin as he ran down the street, chest heaving as he passed in and out of the circles of light weakly cast by the skeletal shapes of the street lamps. The pounding of Ryuga's footsteps on the street followed him like the march of doom. The pain of his broken nose was almost godlike in its purity. Every step drove needles of pain straight back into his brain. Ryuga was screaming something about it being time for him to die. As that didn't fit into Rat's plans at this point, he declined to, and simply kept on running. The exquisiteness of agony can do a lot to drive the fog out of one's brain sometimes, and Rat right now was no exception. Once Ryuga had laid into him, he started to figure out what he'd done wrong. Telling his great-grandfather the precise details of the future he needed to bring about had been a very, very bad idea. The telltale sun-bright glow from behind alerted him to Ryuga's building up of another key attack, and he threw himself sideways through the conveniently open door of the warehouse he was passing. In his haste, he never looked at the sign over the door, Madomokatsu Industries. If it's sharp, we make it. It is events such as these that cause people to think that there quite possibly is someone in charge of the universe, and that he or she has a very nasty sense of humor. Asterisk 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 cause, Kaeri, what are you doing out here? The girl formerly known as Kasumi spared a glance at Akan and flashed a brief smile. Kaeri, what are you doing here? Asked Akan. We were all worried about you. The elder Tendo frowned. Everyone, she said quietly. How'd you get up here, anyway? Usually, we all have to jump up here too. I climbed. Looking again, Akan saw that there were small cuts and scrapes on Kaeri's face, hands, and knees. Some of the tiles leading to the guest room were also out of place, clearly where she pulled herself up. Akan nodded. Is there something on your mind? Kaeri nodded. You want to talk about it? Kaeri shook her head. Do you need time alone? Akan blinked. No. Please stay, said Kaeri softly. There was a desperation in her voice, so severe it touched Akan deeply. The youngest Tendo nodded, taking Kaeri's hand in hers. It had been a while since Kaeri had arrived at the dojo. During that time, it was a great relief to Akan and the others, seeing Kaeri emerge from a mad, shivering wreck to a stronger, more composed woman. She was still jittery in some respects, avoiding Kasumi like the plague, and looking lost and in a daze at times, but she no longer was quick to flee or cry. A lot of that was thanks to Miyabi, who'd spent a lot of time with the alternate Kasumi. But lately, Kaeri, where did Miyabi go? Halt. She didn't say a word. Kaeri shook her head and sighed. Thinking of Miyabi used to cheer her up, but now it saddened her. The girl was becoming harsher, more sneer in her voice than usual and more snap in her answers. Each insult was a slap, each snide remark a stab to the heart. Oh yes, her mind was clearer now. She could clearly see how Miyabi was slowly beginning to hate her. Below, the sound of a broom scraping on brick caught Kaeri's attention. She looked down below and saw her other self, Kasumi, the one that hadn't had her life torn down in flames and ashes. She felt mixed emotions, looking at her alternate self. Oh, how much she hated Kasumi. Blind, oblivious, stupid girl. Doesn't know what's happening around her at all. Stupid girl, letting her family die. Oh, how much she envied Kasumi. Carefree, innocent and happy. Where every day was a good day, making everyone happy with the little things she did around the house. Happy. Sweeping. For some reason the sight of the broomstick in Kasumi's hand caught Kaeri's eyes. The staff. Missing. Long unused mental gears began to creak. Kaeri wondered where Miyabi was indeed. Aken, finally noticing Kaeri staring at Kasumi with a frightening intensity, squeezed her hand. Kaeri? I'm okay, Aken. Everything's okay. Asterisk as Rat's body concentrated on the task of running the hell away from Ryuga. Rat's brain was currently going through what might be described as one major bitch of an identity crisis. The Anocorp OPIM chip was designed to preserve the existence of its host above all else. Unfortunately, its designers had neglected to consider such scenarios as the host being pursued by a homicidal ancestor intent on reducing him to a fine paste. Computers, even extremely sophisticated and intricately tiny ones, do not like contradictions such as this. The quick-thinking but limited brain of the OPIM chip ran through the situation in a fraction of the eye blink of a split second. One attacker is fixated upon host and has capacity to injure fatally or severely enough to make future survival difficult. Two attacker is unlikely to cease attempting to kill host unless injured fatally or severely enough to make future survival difficult. Three attackers' anger will not dissipate with time, making flight futile and dangerous. Four attacker is ancestor of host. Must live for host to come into being. 5 host must survive at all costs. 6 host will not come into existence without survival of attacker. 7 host will not survive without fatal or crippling injury of attacker. 8 fatal or crippling injury of ancestor of host is forbidden. The OPIM programming did what any other decent software would do when faced with an internal contradiction. It went absolutely haywire. Asterisk 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 asterisk. Ryuga stalked into the dim warehouse like a bandana-clad angel of death. Shadows lay thick like swamp murk throughout the building, the dim wash of light from outside that pierced through the dusty and high-set windows the only source of illumination. Wooden crates as tall as he was lay everywhere, in many places stacked haphazardly atop each other as a child's building blocks. "Come on out, little rat," he snarled. "Great-grandfather wants to have a talk with you." Abort, retry, fail. Ryuga blinked. Huh? Runtime error. As his eyes adjusted to the dim light, the lost boy cast his gaze about in search of his descendant. What horrible repercussions Ranma's death would have, he thought sickly. All that monstrosity and pain come about because of one untimely end. And Radico wanted to bring it all about just so he could exist. The selfish little worm. He wasn't worthy to be born of Ryuga's line. Must be from Yukai's side, Ryuga muttered. He did say she ended up in a mental institute. Radico had gone oddly silent after his strange words of before. Ryuga crept deeper into the warehouse, tensed and ready. Fate flare or great-grand aboard father rebooting don't running hurt corner good me. Ryuga spawned. 10 feet behind him, Rat's eyes glowed in the darkness, a swirl of white and black that merged into a gray so intense it hurt to look upon. Air writhed in agony around Radico's cupped hands. Then the world turned white as new snow. Ryuga flew through the air, clipped a precarious stack of crates, and yelled out in surprise as they collapsed atop him and buried him. The key blast had been achingly cold, a solid hammer of ice. Radico walked disjointedly towards the fallen crates, synapses randomly firing like firecrackers on New Year's Day. Within his brain, the OPIM chip pulled him one way and then the other like a deranged puppet master. Base instincts of fight and flight were stimulated simultaneously, and Rat's body jerkily tried to follow both at once. BAKUSAI 10KDSU. The crates exploded outward, and hurled their inventory of pins, needles and nails through the air in a hurricane of steely death. Processing holy response shit. Rat's left leg went one way, and his right went the other. The end result made him sprawl to the floor, and let the scything wave of sharp implements pass overhead. Ryuga shoved the remains of the crates off himself and strode over to where the prone Radico lay twitching and writhing as the Anocorp device merrily turned upon itself. "He's completely insane," Ryuga said as he watched a thin stream of drool slide from Rat's mouth. He almost pitied the boy, but then, if Rat had his way, Akan would die. Ryuga reached down to pick Rat up by the head, in preparation to embedding him several feet into the concrete floor. Somewhere amidst the spasms of malfunctioning software, the chip made Rat swing a foot up and catch Ryuga squarely between the legs. Ryuga gasped softly, and fell over in the way that only a solid and unexpected kick in the jewels can make a man fall. A wild chance made the chip come to a coherent decision. Radico sprang up onto his feet and ran. Ryuga staggered to his feet a moment later to see Rab darting around the edge of a crate stack. Lost from sight. He might never find him in this darkness. Radiko would get away, and he'd kill Ranma, and Akan would kill herself, and it would be all his fault. Those thoughts were depressing enough. The throbbing pain from the good kick Rad had given him in his softest bits just pushed it over the edge. The column of searing yellow light shot through the roof of the warehouse, a bolt hurled at the heavens. Like a pillar dividing earth from sky, it hung for all of a second in a flaring glory of power against the stars. On the bolts, the seaman panicked, blinded by the intensity of the light. Then it fell. There was no distinct sound of the half-dozen warehouses within the radius of the blast being smashed into flinders. Everything was lost to the enormous muffled whump of the blast touching down. When the light cleared from the eyes of the seaman, there was an enormous crater filled with debris. Broken lampposts threw clouds of sparks like fireflies against the night, and tangles of overhead power lines sizzled and cracked amidst the ruins. In the wreckage of an entire 2 blocks of the harbor district, 2 figures stood. One had his fists clenched at his sides. The air around him still blurred and shimmered from the force of the blast he had just unleashed. The other had his arms flying out to his sides. His legs were pumping frantically. The blast had laid him flat out on the ground. But now he was running as if his homicide-land pissed-off ancestor was trying to kill him. Sometimes a metaphor just isn't more appropriate than the genuine reality. Needless to say, with 2 hibikis in a high-speed chase, it didn't take them long to leave Tokyo. Or Asia, for that matter. Birds. They're singing, aren't they? Kaeri whispered. She looked up towards Miyabi with eyes that were flat and dull, but had a spark of interest. Miyabi grinned, nodding. HMM. Are you done with that soup, or not? I've got to get the bowl back into the kitchen before Kasumi starts the dialogue. I'm sorry. Don't start with the sobbing again. Geez. I meant, Miyabi, could we talk for a minute? It was Akan. Miyabi took the occasion to retreat, leaving Kaeri be. Sure. What's up, Mom? I meant. Akan rubbed the knuckles of her left hand with the palm of her right. Not here. What? Don't wanna offend Scarface's sensibilities? Don't worry about it. She's getting tougher, aren't ya, Eddie? Miyabi punched Kaeri's shoulder playfully and paid no attention to the ensuing gasp and hiss. She's not the only one getting tougher. Oh, yeah? What's on your mind, Mom? You're changing. That'd be neat trick, considering the amount of clothes around here that fits me. I've got to scramble just to keep myself with fresh undies. Are you? Kaeri was trying to speak again. Do you help your parents with the laundry? Why do you wanna know? Miyabi. Akan looked at her daughter sternly. Okay. I get the point. Geez. Yeah. Sure, I help when they ask me, but I don't like it or anything. I'm tidy, but I'm not a clean freak like your twin sister back there." She jerked a thumb at the kitchen. "Oh, was that the last of the soup?" "It wasn't, but she grabbed the bowl from Kaeri's hands anyway. I'll just take that to the kitchen for you, then I'm going out for a while." But Kaeri's hands still held an ethereal bowl. Her fingers began to open and close. "I want to hear. Cheer up. Mom can tell you stories. Catch you later." There was silence for a while after Miyabi left the room. Then Akan sat on the edge of the couch and began to gossip. She couldn't go on for long. "Oh, go on," said Kaeri. "You were saying about Ranma and Tatewaki." "I'm sorry, I'm worried about Miyabi. She's different." "Yes, not herself." "No, she isn't." All this anger, and her snappy comments. "Do you think it's because Ranma and I mean, we're engaged, but it was kind of against our wills, and we never knew it could work out before she came, so we still fight so much? Do you think that's what has her like this?" Kaeri shook her head. "You and Ranma, you shouldn't fight. But Miyabi, I think she has a new friend." "A new friend?" "Yes, one of mine." And with that Kaeri fell silent. Asterisk 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 the OPIM chip liked running. Yeah. It had finally figured it out. Definitely running. As long as Rat kept on running, Ryuga couldn't kill him. Definitely good. And the change in scenery was nice, too. Fresh air, the Champs-Élysées, the Kremlin. Maybe it'd allow Rat to make a pit stop in Brussels before lunch. Its programmers had always wanted to see Brussels. All it had to do was keep Rat running forever, and he'd be fine. Definitely. Keep him running through everything. Through anything. Rat slammed through an electric fence, flooding the chip with more juice than it had ever tasted before. Yeah. That was the ticket. The herd of OPIM made Rat's head turn and read the sign above the proper entrance to the corral, Entrada Prohibida, Toros Reservados para la Corrida de Pamplona. Ah. Yes. The herd of Spanish bulls was most definitely not the ticket. Asterisk 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 Miyabi held the staff down on the ground before her, on its upper end with both hands. She closed her eyes. It was trying to speak to her, she knew that. Maybe she just wasn't concentrating enough. "I know you want to tell me something. But can't you just speak up?" Symbols that she'd never seen before floated across her mind's eyes. They felt familiar, somehow. What are these? Are they letters? What? The figures began to dance and twirl. They were trying to arrange themselves in a way she could understand. They were trying to. She gripped the staff at mid-length, now, and brought her hands against her chest. "You're too far. If only we could melt, or bind together." The symbols were transforming, now. Their edges were dissolving and reshaping themselves into contours well known to Miyabi. Here. That's it. She could feel her brain being picked for her native tongue. It felt like a kiss or a caress, and she helped it along. Only a bit more, now. Gold and black swirled and twisted, fading into brown, then flashing into ARGH. Miyabi-chan, thank you for taking care of this for me. Now I need it back. The girl didn't answer Kaeri. She was too busy clutching her head and moaning. You really, said the woman, wiping the rug with the edge of her smock. Should dust more often. Where were you keeping it? It likes the dark. Some hissing from Miyabi. Kaeri didn't eat it, but only frowned and looked ahead with a blank look. It likes you, too, she concluded. I've told it that it can't have you. It's mine. The staff flared red for a moment, and with it Miyabi writhed in pain. And then they both fell silent. Kaeri gazed at the staff one more time, sternly. You are mine. There were further curses and shouts, but these came from below. Asterisk 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 Ryo Saotome fell to earth, azure flames clinging to his body. His mind was burning as well, hit with a massive nausea and throbbing migraine. He was vaguely aware of the others landing roughly with grunts of pain and cries of anger, but his own pain made them far less of a priority. He staggered to his feet and looked around. It's blue, he muttered, clutching his head with a hand. He was vaguely aware of steadying hands helping him to his feet. Mother? Ow. Man, he'd to work on those landings. No, father. That's right, he was a girl at the moment. Pop? Ryo asked weakly. Something went wrong. Is everyone okay? Sorta. We all kinda got burned by some weird blue flame too. Children's unconscious, Ishido's kinda awake, and Muhoshin's still out. You? Been better. You okay? Yeah, Pop, just fine. But why's everything blue? Blue? Oh boy. Ryo's stomach churned and he fell to his knees. He fought the urge to throw up and lost, retching up dark blue bile. Ryo shockily wiped his mouth and stared at the azure pool below him. This is not good. Oh man, said Ranma quietly. Come on, Ryo. Let's get the doc to look at ya. No, I know what's wrong. He slipped the lockets into Ranma's hands. Pop, it's important. Hide him, but not in the same place. Don't tell anyone. His eyes sealed shut, and Ryo Saotome slumped unconscious in his father's arms. Asterisk 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 asterisk. Oh. Burma had blurred into Bangkok, which morphed into an industrial area in the suburbs of Berlin. The Hibikis continued their chase along a bleak landscape of girders and piles of sand, eventually, inevitably entering a dimly lit warehouse full of hazardous materials. The sign above the door, Motomokatsu Industrien, Deutscher Zweig, Lebendruhen Substanzen 1 Spezialid Rat kept on running, trying frantically to unwrap several coils of American razor wire from his legs as he did. He had to keep on running, or Ryugu was going to catch him. For some reason, the razor wire didn't actually hurt. He only removed it because it inconvenienced the fastest running possible. His nose didn't hurt anymore either. Nothing had for ages. It was as if some kind god had filled his entire system with so many amphetamines and painkillers that he could have run through a pool of electrified acid and not felt a thing. Speaking of that, it seemed almost contrived, but what the hey? One of the many suspiciously fragile containers in the building had broken open, and the industrial-strength acid it held had just happened to spread across the floor in such a way that the stripped wires of the conveniently fallen power lines had dropped into the edge. Somehow, it made absolutely perfect sense to run through it. It was, after all, the quickest route away from the pursuing Ryuga. Oh, funny. He kept on screaming. It was as if his body were aware that this hurt, but something were keeping the pain signals from reaching his brain. What a stupid notion. He promptly forgot it. In fact, he couldn't even remember what he'd been thinking about in the first place. Except running. Hey, wow, he said as he noticed something sharp pierce the sole of his shoe. More coal drops. Obviously, Motomokatsu Industries believed in sharing products among its branches. Groovy. He giggled. Darkness. Ryo Saotome found himself enshrouded in it, his head still spinning, no more slowly than it had been when they first landed. In the distance, he saw a shimmering blue light. From past experiences, he was already wary of it but had no other direction to go. Cautiously, he approached it, and found that it wasn't one light, but many. He found himself surrounded by infinite shimmering points of light, and as his eyes passed them he saw brief visions of people and places, some familiar, some alien. Alternate realities, he realized. This is what he was looking at. But how did he get here? It felt an awful lot like a hangover for Childra Jansen. Headache, dizzy feeling, all the other usual symptoms. Not fair, she mumbled. I don't remember a party. Miss Jansen? MRR? She slowly opened her eyes. A blurry, speckled face gazed down at her. Ishido, said you. Sorry, miss. Just me, Dr. Tofu. You're here at my clinic. Children rubbed her eyes, then tried to sit up. A gentle hand on her shoulder pushed her back down. Don't, said Tofu. You need your rest. What happened? Asked Childra, closing her eyes and resting on the bed once more. Where's Ishido? He's resting, like you. You all are suffering exposure to some strange energy. With time and some rest you should all recover. Millimeters good. Tofu watched as Childra closed her eyes and rested again, then pulled the curtain around her bed and left. A few seconds passed, then Childra slowly rose from her bed and pulled aside the curtain around her bed. Around her, several other curtains were drawn, no doubt the other beds. She walked quietly across the room to the other curtains, peeking inside at everyone. Curtain number 1. Ranma. Curtain number 2. His son, Ryo. Odd, thought Childra, were his eyes glowing blue. She moved on to the next curtain and nearly gasped. The other Ryo was there, eyes wide open but lifeless. He laid limp on the medical table, an empty cell. She particularly noted the straitjacket that held him tightly, as well as the handcuff that kept him attached to the bed. Strange that such a weak-looking boy could be so dangerous. Well then, curtain number 4 must be it. With a smile, she parted the curtains and at last spied her dear Shido. He looked awfully cute, asleep like that. Like a shark through water, she easily slid into the sheets, embracing his unconscious form. A few minutes later, she joined him in rest. Ryuga raced after Rat. Up ahead, the floor was covered in a glinting sea of spiky metal. Ryuga tried to guess by Rat's posture which way he would go around it, but he hid his intentions perfectly. Then he ran through the caldrops, screaming all the way. Ryuga blinked, and went left around them. This meant that Radiko got further ahead than him, but by the sounds Rat made as he stepped down the caldrops, Rat could take the lead that way if he wanted. Sizzle. Hiss. Crackle. Hey. Surprised did not begin to describe Ryuga's reaction as he watched Rat splash, howling in agony, through an ankle-deep pool of electrified acid. How is he still moving? Ryuga murmured as he skirted around the acid. Rat got even further ahead. He seemed to simply be running in a straight line away from Ryuga. AURGGGHHHH. Ryuga winced in mutual sympathy and took the long way around the second bed of caldrops that had been laid down in the rubbling of the warehouses. Ryuga gulped. Rat was going to get away if he kept on running like this. For you, Ken. Good thing his boots were tough. Oh, feeling better? Ken. Miyabi nodded, sipping the tea afterwards very slowly. What happened to you anyway? Ken. I found you unconscious and on the floor, and you looked like you were in pain. Guess I just fell asleep and had a nightmare, answered Miyabi, laughing nervously. You'll be glad to hear your dad's back. Miyabi perked up. He's okay? Ken nodded. Miyabi frowned. Wait, that means _he_single quote S back. Who? My so-called half-brother. Did he manage to bring that other guy back? Ken nodded. Miyabi sighed. Maybe we'll be able to go home now. The girl missed the slight sadness in Ken's voice when she replied, Yes, I guess you will. You know, this really is good tea. You really made it. Miyabi asked her mother teasingly. Ken played along, swatting Miyabi's arm. Oh, I'm not bad at EVRYTHING. They laughed, and Miyabi closed her eyes, savoring the moment. Suddenly, It all came rushing back to her. The staff. Her. What she did. How she treated Kaeri. Oh no. What? Asked Ken. What is it? Where's Kaeri? Oh God, I messed up, Mom. I really did, and now I've got to go find her. Oh no. Ken tried to calm Miyabi down, putting a hand on her arm. Kaeri's okay. She just said she was going to take a walk. Did you see if she was holding a stick? Asked Miyabi frantically. I think so. Oh no. I've gotta go save her. Thanks, Mom. Before Ken could say another word, Miyabi sprang up and ran like the wind. She rushed through the house, looking in every room, around the yard, then hit the streets. That stick, whatever it was, she had to get rid of it. Over rooftops she ran, frantic in her search, speeding across fences, hopping across boulders in the waterways. She searched all the places Kaeri might have gone to, the markets, the malls, the parks, even Furanken High. And still she did not find her. Where, thought Miyabi, just where would I go if I was a scared, scarred Kasumi with a stick that radiates evil? She snapped her fingers. Dr. Tofu's. Miyabi ran again, hoping she wasn't too late, hoping Kaeri wouldn't do anything crazy, hoping she wouldn't arrive just in time to witness the tail end of a bloody killing spree winding down. She ran into Dr. Tofu's clinic hectically, bursting through the door. Dr. Tofu. Dr. Tofu. She turned around quickly, blushing deep red as the naked man in front of Tofu scrambled to cover up. Naked man. And Tofu. And the hand. Tofu's hand. Whoa. Yikes. Oh my. Miyabi-chan, said Tofu. We can talk after I'm through with this rectal exam. Right. Okay. Leaving now. Sorry about that. Blushing redder than any human should, Miyabi quickly stepped out of the office and closed the door, taking care to not turn back. This is something I think we won't be telling Mum, she muttered to herself. With many deep breaths and thoughts about mundane things, Miyabi finally got the blush off of her face. She decided a walk around the block would be good. She'd rather not look Dr. Tofu's patient in the face when he was done. As she walked around one side of the building, her senses began nagging her. Her father called it battle sense and her mother called it intuition. Whatever it was usually right. She looked around slowly, cautiously, then saw what was bothering her. Kaeri. She was perched in a tree overlooking the Tendo clinic, peering into one of the windows intensely, the strange stick clutched in her hands. She approached Kaeri cautiously. Auntie? Kaeri looked down, an eerie sort of calm in her eyes. Hello, Miyabi-chan, she said evenly. Auntie, I'm sorry. Kaeri tilted her head slightly, looking puzzled. Sorry? I was being a real jerk before and I didn't even know it and I really don't hate you and that's okay, Miyabi-chan. I understand. You do? Kaeri nodded, a light smile gracing her lips. "Auntie, if you do understand, you know you have to let go of the stick." Miyabi held a hand out, looking at Kaeri with hopeful eyes. Kaeri shook her head. "I have everything under control, Miyabi-chan." "That thing twisted me," argued Miyabi. "And it'll twist you too. Please, auntie, before it's too late." Kaeri shook her head again. "You're not strong enough to have it." "I am. But when you came here you were a wreck." The staff. Kaeri closed her eyes, turning away. The staff was not the problem, but the expression on Kaeri's face when she looked into Miyabi's eyes took her entirely by surprise. It wasn't the troubled, haunted look that so dominated her, but a look of utter calm and tranquility. It was a face you could only find on Kasumi. "Everything's fine now, Miyabi-chan. I promise." And then it was gone, replaced by the more vulnerable expression that usually was kept on Kaeri's face. But she smiled. "A little. Auntie," said Miyabi slowly. "Why are you here? Is it because of Dr. Tofu?" Kaeri's troubled face darkened a little more. "No. I don't think I should see him. Not anymore." She brightened, a little smile on her face. "I'm here to visit someone else." "Someone else? But who else?" The image of Dr. Tofu's patient immediately slammed into her head, causing Miyabi to blush badly again. No, can't be that," she mentally berated herself. "Who?" she finally asked. Kaeri pointed to the window. Standing on the ground, Miyabi couldn't see, so she leapt up to join Kaeri, then peered down. Behind the window was a boy, pale, skinny, and unconscious. His expression was entirely blank, devoid of expression, and he was bound by a straitjacket. "Him?" asked Miyabi. Kaeri nodded, the small smile still evident. Miyabi looked again. "Him?" "Muhoshin-san," said Kaeri quietly. Miyabi could hear the care in her voice. "Isn't he the guy they were chasing after? Ryo and the others?" asked Miyabi. "Muhoshin-san is just misunderstood. He was hurt, like me." "I don't know." "I do," Kaeri told her firmly. He saved me from them." A slight tremor developed in her hand, quickly stilled. "He helped me to get better, and he sat up with me like you did, and, well, he was very nice." Miyabi could see her cheeks color slightly. "But Ryo's been chasing the guy." "Ryo hasn't done anything for me lately," Kaeri said, her voice turning slightly cool. "Or for my family." She frowned slightly. "He doesn't care, Miyabi-chan. Watch him. He'll do what he thinks is the right thing, no matter how it hurts." She voice fell to a whisper. "And he's not right. He shouldn't be here. You know how it's supposed to be. You know Change and Ranma love each other. So whose son is he? What happened to have him born?" Kaeri smiled slightly. "A cold, empty thing. Does he want things to be like that here?" Miyabi swallowed slightly. "He's a jerk, but I don't think he'd." "Why not?" Kaeri pressed. You tried to make things just like home. The way they should be. What has this Ryo been telling you, Caillou? HMM? What has he been doing? You don't think? Miyabi trailed off, aghast. What if he had? He disappeared and reappeared mysteriously. She knew he'd spoken to Yukayu at least more than once, and she was beginning to think that he'd made the locket in the first place. What for? Would he? She weakly finished. Kaeri shrugged. I don't know. But don't trust him. You can trust Muhoshin-san, but don't trust him. Miyabi glanced through the window once again, and frowned. This was the terrible menace Ryo had been chasing. The deadly martial artist and killer. He didn't look like he could get through a set of push UPS, let alone take on Ryo Saotome. The frown deepened. If he'd taken care of Kaeri, he couldn't be that bad. Certainly he had to be better than her half-brother, who had apparently first ignored and then dragged back a terribly hurt, traumatized woman. Asterisk 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 asterisk. The pursuit ended several hours later, in a blind alley that backed up against a 10-story building only blocks from the Tokyo dock where they'd started. Ryugi and Radiko had left a meandering trail of destruction throughout the harbor district, which had only lessened a little after the OPIM ship had let Rap move out of a straight line to use doors rather than running straight through walls. Both of them were bloody, bruised and nearly dead from exhaustion. Rap staggered into the dark alley, and slumped against a wall. Soon enough the sun would rise, but right now the narrow space between buildings was filled with deep shadows. Even the greatest craftsman is only as good as his tools. The OPIM ship had given its best, but Ryugi's pursuit had been absolutely relentless. Now the host was so exhausted that making him further exert himself could likely lead to a heart attack or respiratory failure. Even the continued manipulation of the chemical levels in his brain and body was becoming dangerous. In response, the beleaguered ship shut down all functions but the monitoring of its host to await a time when it could safely effect his actions to preserve his life. Rap looked blearily up as his great-grandfather came panting into the opening of the alleyway. The only way in which the bone-tired Ryugi would have been able to kill Rap right now would probably have been by falling on him from a great height. He was damn well going to try, however. "Come here, you little sociopath," he muttered. "Great-grandfather wants to talk to you." Rap backed further away into the depths of the alley, and gulped as he realized there were no doors concealed behind the rotting mounds of garbage, or some other means of escape. It wasn't like he had the energy to run further anyway. Once he came down from the effects of the chemical stimulation the OPIM had done to him to keep him running, he'd likely simply collapse. Ryugi came closer, using his umbrella like a walking stick. He giggled. End of the line. In one of those non-coincidental coincidences that happen to Juzenkai victims, someone poured a bucket of mopping water out their apartment window on top of his head. P-Chan squealed. Radiko laughed hysterically. "The gods are on my side," he cried, and shook a fist at the sky. Then P-chan bit Rat on the foot. Rat screamed. In the back of the alleyway, something shifted. Many somethings. Feral eyes glowed redly as lean and hungry shapes padded out on four limbs from their nest amidst the garbage. Rat stared at the wild dogs. "Shit," he muttered. The wild dogs stared at Rat and P-chan, and said, "Arf." This translated in their crude but ugly language as breakfast. Being threatened by a hungry pack of dogs can do wonders for making you feel invigorated again. Rat and P-chan paused for a split second, and then took off as if they were both being chased by an enormous pack of savage wild dogs. Once again, reality takes over where metaphor fails. Asterisk 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 it used to be quiet. Muhoshin-san. Until the voice. Muhoshin-san, can you hear me? He felt slightly irritated at the voice, interrupting the peace and quiet that the absolute void held for him. After bearing witness to infinity, some time spent in absolute nothingness was what his mind desperately needed. Muhoshin-san. The voice seemed familiar, and it stirred something within him. A memory of something. Her. Slowly, he opened his eyes. The world was draped in shadows, yet what little illumination there was showed enough to warm his heart. "'Cause," he said, his voice barely audible and his throat stinging dry. "Kaeri." Muhoshin-san. He felt soft arms surround him, and the scent that only a woman's hair could carry filled his nose. Where am I?" "You're in Dr. Tofu's clinic." "I see. And the others? They're here too, sleeping." Muhoshin nodded slightly, then closed his eyes again. It felt good, being there, with her like this. He could get used to it, certainly. Though something was missing. Muhoshin narrowed his eyes. Where is my locket?" he hissed. "I don't know, Muhoshin-san. I didn't see it when you came back and the other Ryo didn't have it. But I need that locket," he hissed, his voice becoming angrier. "I need the locket. I need it now. Muhoshin-san, please, you need to rest." "I do not need to rest. I need that lock." Muhoshin's next words were lost as he coughed and wheezed. What little energy he had left quickly drained by it. "Muhoshin-san, please rest," said Kaeri softly. She gave him a gentle kiss on the cheek, then tucked him in. "I'll look for the locket. Don't worry. Kaeri. Don't tell HM. Don't tell them. I'm awake. I won't." And with that reassurance, Muhoshin closed his eyes and returned to oblivion. Asterisk 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 Miyabi waited patiently outside while Kaeri snuck inside and talked with Muhoshin. While she didn't mean to, she watched from the window as Kaeri spoke to the boys. She was surprised when she saw Kaeri suddenly embrace him, and couldn't help but feel happy for her when she saw how happy Kaeri was at that moment. A moment later, Kaeri returned, looking much better than before. Not normal, not Kasumi normal, but not so much on edge anymore. "Let's go home," she said with a smile. Okay. As the two walked, Miyabi and Kaeri curiously. So, he's okay? Kaeri nodded happily, then frowned. Oh, Miyabi-chan, please don't tell anyone I talked to him. It's very important, please. A strange request, but Miyabi didn't see the harm in it. Well, okay. Thank you, Miyabi-chan. As one day passed to the next, the various members of Ryo Saotome's transdimensional team eventually recovered from their illnesses. Ranma, with his natural toughness and high constitution, was first to recover and return home. Ishido was released soon after, but remained at the clinic until Children was declared healthy enough the day after. Only two people remained, the two Ryos. Ryo Saotome tossed and turned, uneasy in his slumber. Sometimes Ranma would visit, mixed emotions brought forth as he watched his possible future son's troubled sleep. Sometimes Yukayo would visit, motherly worry obvious on her face as she tended to her son with care. Ryo Muhoshin, on the other hand, was absolutely comatose and unmoving. He was still seemingly comatose and left unguarded while the others recovered from their illness, though that changed when Ishido found out. After he raised an uproar about how careless it was to leave him unguarded, a constant vigil was kept on Muhoshin. Sometimes it was Ishido himself, with a suspicious glare. Sometimes it was Children with a baleful stare. Two Nerima regulars also took turns, Ranma with a lazy demeanor, though his attention was far sharper than it appeared to be, and Yukayo, who watched over Muhoshin with the diligence of a prison warden. And sometimes it was Miyabi on guard duty, looking curiously at the so-called menace that was Ryo Muhoshin. Ryo Saotome remained unconscious for quite some time. Ryo Muhoshin, despite all appearances, was far more alert than he appeared to be. Hello. Children nearly had a heart attack, being used to nothing but silence while on guard duty. She immediately whirled around, her bow whipping out just short of his head. He stared at her blankly with dead eyes. Hello, he said again. Yeah. Hello to you too, she replied sarcastically. He merely blinked at her. Hello, he said again, still looking mostly blank. Ah, a few marbles short I see. Maybe. She stared at him, gripping her bow, as he simply went to sleep. Ishido glared at him. Ryo stared back, though with a fairly blank expression. You're not fooling anyone, Muhoshin, grumbled Ishido. No, I'm not, replied Muhoshin casually. He closed his eyes and relaxed on the bed, a slightly smug grin on his lips. Tell me, he said calmly. You love that Jansen girl, yes? And if you ever lay a hand on her again, I'm not the one, he interrupted calmly, that you should worry about. Huh? You. Her. Different worlds, purred Muhoshin. You know he won't let this situation continue. What? What are you talking about? Isn't Isn't that other Ryo so keen on setting things right? What does that have to do with anything? Muhoshin sighed. Think about it. I'm feeling tired. And with no further words, Muhoshin went to sleep. Asterisk 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 night came to pass over Nirima, once more bringing rest to most of her children. In Tofu's clinic, Ryo Saotome spent another night in restless sleep, unknown visions plaguing his dreams. Ryo Muhoshin slept just as uneasily, his hand over a heart-shaped hole in his chest where his locket once burned. Sitting by him, Ishido slept lightly, awakened by the slightest sound. His sleep was far from relaxed. In Yukayu dreamed of a future with her Ranma, and their son Ryo. It was a happy dream, filled with the sweet kisses and promises of happy tomorrows. All was dark in the Tendo home, with her inhabitants at rest once more. Except for one, and she'd done this before. Kaeri wandered the grounds in darkness once more, this time with slow and methodical searching instead of the desperate scrabbling she'd done last time. There were so many places to hide a locket. Oh, so many. Asterisk 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 asterisk, and on the next day, Ryo Saotome rose from his sleep. "Ah, I see you're finally awake," said Dr. Tofu. Ryo groaned. "How are you feeling?" "Tired," said Ryo. "The others?" "They're all fine," Tofu assured him. How long have I been out?" "A couple of days," said Tofu. Ryo's eyes widened. "Days." He suddenly stood up, only to slump back into bed. "Damn. Still weak." "Hey, don't rush things," said Tofu. "You'll only make yourself more sick." Seeing Ryo settling back into bed, Tofu relaxed. "Think I know." "Why?" said Ryo weakly. "Why?" asked Tofu. "Lockets." Was holding both lockets. "Must have been some sort of feedback." Tofu nodded. "That might explain the disruption in your aura. I'll let Ranma know you're awake now. You just get your rest." Ryo nodded and sunk lower into the blankets. More rest was definitely needed. Everything was still blue. Asterisk 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 asterisk. "Hello," said Muhoshin, still as wooden and unemotional as he was the day before. Childra found his gaze eerie, despite its lack of malice. "Hello to you too," said Childra in a fairly unfriendly manner. "He's awake," said Muhoshin. "The other Ryo?" "Yeah, he's awake," said Childra, keeping a hand on her bow. "You said goodbye to Ishido, I guess." Childra glared at him for a moment, then laughed. "And why would I do that? You're in no position to do anything to us." Muhoshin raised an eyebrow. "All I have to do is watch." "And what's that mean?" "Other Ryo." "You're talking nonsense," said Childra. "He's all for setting things in order." Muhoshin gazed at her flatly for a moment, then closed his eyes and sighed. "Ishido doesn't belong in your world. You don't belong in his." "That doesn't matter," she replied, sounding a little bitter. They stayed there in silence for a while, Muhoshin looking very relaxed while children seemed disturbed. Finally, Muhoshin spoke again. Help me stop him. Why should I? You tried to kill us last time. You. You were trying to take my precious away from me. Muhoshin stretched and scratched his side, eyes still closed. Help me. You'll stay together. You've lied before. Muhoshin opened one eye and peered at her. Take your chances with the Boy Scout, then. Kaeri strode through the upper hall, grinding her mental gears in time to her footsteps. She ran through her checklist again. Nothing seemed to be missing, and there was little left to do. Everything was almost right. She was almost ready to leave this place with Muhoshin-san. Almost. They both had work to do. Maybe this time they could do it together. Now, wouldn't that be nice? She decided that it would be. A task shared is a task enjoyed, and Kaeri hadn't realized how lonely she'd become until meeting Miyabi. She had needed this. Just a rest. A break. To pull herself together. To sort things out. To claw herself upwards through the slime with her fingernails, away from the blazing depths of the pit of insanity, but it had already singed her. That worried her. She couldn't afford to go mad. Or madder. She suspected that she wasn't completely sane. But then, who cared? As long as it didn't interfere with the work, as long as it didn't get too bad, as long as the shadows stayed out of sight. And then there was her staff. It was lying on her bed, at the moment. She could feel it. Miyabi was too weak, too easily snared. She didn't have the will to deal with it. Perhaps being a little insane wasn't so bad after all. Kaeri was many things, but weak was not one of them. Now that she knew exactly what the staff was, she could deal with it. Not master it, but deal with it. It wanted to kill things. That was fine with her. Certain things needed to be killed. But only certain things. She would make the decisions, not it, but it would take effort. A lot of it. The staff was strong, and cunning. It waited for just the right moment, subtly trying to color her emotions and mind in the process. Now that she knew what to look for, it would have a harder time of things. But even with her added knowledge, what lay ahead was still rather worrying. In fact, Kaeri was so caught up in her brooding that she utterly forgot to keep one of her major goals in mind, namely, avoiding Kasumi, and, with the inevitability of such events, she turned the corner and nearly ran straight into the eldest Tenbo's sister. Kasumi blinked, tried for a smile, faltered, and then managed a brightly polite beam. Oh dear. Hello. Kaeri favored her with the sort of polite look one gives a friendly mangy dog. Hello. There was an awkward pause, and then Kaeri began to walk past her double. Why do you hate me? Kaeri stopped, slowly turned. The smile on Kasumi's face was as immutable as the pyramids. She shrugged. Because you're blind. Kasumi smiled in silence. Because you're stupid. The smile seemed to twitch a little. It must. Kaeri thought, tagged in her imagination. Because the word she needed was one that had lain long unused in her vocabulary. Because you're happy. This last dissolved the sugary lip curve so that the human vegetable could ask a question. Aren't you any of those? Kaeri sighed. No. Not anymore. Her double was a potato. Or a turnip. Probably not as advanced as a leek, and radishes had too much character. Who are you? I was you. Kasumi nodded slowly. Why would I hate myself? I don't really hate anything. You can learn. Oh dear. I'd really rather not. Kaeri almost laughed. You'd rather not. You'd rather not. You think. I chose. The fire came. I didn't know it could burn more than trash and cookies. But now I do. You can learn. I've learned. And sometimes, I'd rather not just isn't good enough. Life doesn't work like that. I tried it, once, and it all ended. What happened? I went to a seminar in Osaka. I came back, and they were all dead. She poked her double lightly in the chest. People think they take you for granted, but it's really the other way around. What would you do without them? Who would you cook for? What would you clean? Again she poked Kasumi, this time not so gently. Stupid girl. What would you do when your reason for a living dies? All you do is take care of them. What happens when they're gone? They're not going any. Her hand came around hard, catching Kasumi on the side of the cheek with an echoing slap. That's what I thought, you stupid girl. That's exactly what I thought, and then they were dead. So I had a choice, you see. I had fallen out of heaven, and landed in hell, and I could either stay there or use the Nanvan mirror to fix things. She chuckled, watching as Kasumi rubbed at the side of her cheek, a nervous look in her eyes. I did. I fixed things. But you can never go home again. I fixed things for some other Kasumi, who had never had anyone cut off her fingers, or put her face to a hot grill. The same blind, stupid, worthless Kasumi as always. Not me. So I had left hell, and you can't ever go back to heaven, and that just leaves purgatory. Envy is a very bad reason to hate someone, Kasumi said softly. Kaeri stared at her for a moment, and then slumped. Maybe. But it's not just that. You just take care of the easy things, girl. The things you enjoy. You ignore the rest, and they can't afford that. Open your eyes and pay attention. But, no buts. I know you. Don't think you can hide from me. I know you think that if you just do what Mother did, everything will be okay. That's a lie. It won't. Kasumi flinched. It has been. Oh. It really. The second slap actually sent her sprawling. Idiot. It was alright because I made it so. Because I went back and was cut and burned. So they could live, and so you could be stupid and happy. It could have been you, you stupid little girl. It should have been. I just want to go home and have things the way they were. But I can't because you're in my place. Kasumi slowly climbed to her feet. Don't you hit me. I won't. Kaeri laughed. You can't stop me. You're weak. You don't have the will. But you could have. And maybe you will. Because I'm going to tell you a secret. A secret? Kaeri winked with her one good eye. A secret. You see, my seminar? It hasn't happened yet. This place is a year behind my timeline. Kasumi stared at her. What does that? Kaeri giggled. It means that what happened to me hasn't occurred yet. If it occurs, I'm not sure whether it will or not. The locket is funny. Some places are so alike, and some are so different. Who knows? You might be the earlier me. Or maybe you'll be weaker than I was, and will just kill yourself after your entire world is destroyed. Or maybe you'll just rot in your empty little apartment. Who knows? Maybe nothing will happen at all. She turned, and continued down the hallway. But don't bet on it, Kasumi. Asterisk 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 asterisk. It felt good to be back on his feet, mused Ryo Saotome. Though he wasn't on his feet at the moment, he was at least finally out of bed. Though Ranma had argued against it, Ryo took guard duty over Muhoshin. He was hoping to talk some sense into his adversary, even though all previous attempts had failed miserably. Never giving up was something he liked to think he'd gotten from his father. Hello, Muhoshin. His adversary, on the other hand, seemed to have lost his fight. He laid passively on his bed, not struggling to get out of his straitjacket at all. According to the others, he hadn't made any attempt to escape at all. Even now, Muhoshin seemed eerily passive. Hello, said Muhoshin, taking a moment to open his eyes and glance briefly at his nemesis. After that, he settled back into silence, closing his eyes. While Ryo was generally a good speaker, Muhoshin's passive attitude left him speechless. And so they passed an hour this way, Ryo watching over Muhoshin in peace and quiet. Saotome, said Muhoshin, suddenly breaking the silence. Yeah? If you're up and about, why aren't we all home yet? Asked Muhoshin, suspicion in his voice. I'm still not feeling entirely well. Everything's still a nice shade of blue. There was a hint of a sneer in his voice. Ryo ignored it. Saotome, said Muhoshin. If I asked you to give me my locket back, you would say no, wouldn't you? I would. And if I were to get it back, you'd chase me again. Yeah. Muhoshin, you're not weak, that's all I needed to know. But, quiet. I'd like to rest. Things are still a nice shade of blue. I'm sure you know the feeling. Once more, they fell into silence. And once more Muhoshin broke it. Saotome? Yeah? You're a lot like me. Ryo frowned. What's that supposed to mean? Whatever it meant, Muhoshin declined to say. Asterisk 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 asterisk. Miyabi peered cautiously around her, making sure there would be none to overhear her conversation. Hey, Muhoshin, you awake? He lazily lifted an eyelid. I've been thinking about what Kaeri said about you and did you really save her life? Muhoshin's expression darkened. Yes, I did. She looked him sternly in the eye. So what would you do if I set you free? If I'm what they made me out to be, I guess I'd sneak up on them and slit their throats. But of course, I'm not like that. Instead, I'll just take my locket and leave. You're not gonna hurt anyone. He remained silent for a while, then finally replied, I only bite when bitten. Okay, then. I'm gonna let you go. But not yet. Don't release me yet. 'Cause Kaeri hasn't found my locket yet. No sense in alarming the others too early. Okay. Irritated by his lack of progress with Muhoshin, and feeling restless in general, Muhoshin took a walk once Miyabi came in to take over the watch. No sense delaying returning them home, right? The longer he put it off, the more he ran the risk of something going wrong again. Everything was in place for him to go home again. No sense in putting it off, right? He found himself at the Tendo residence and hesitated as he stood at its gate. Before, he'd always felt good when he saw this place. Now, however, there was no doubt as to the slightly unpleasant undercurrent that he represented. Ranma was supposed to marry Akan, not Yukayu. Not his mom. His very presence there was a reminder that soon Tenbo's dreams would not come to pass. They probably didn't think he noticed it, but he did, when Soon cast a wary glance at him. Akan frowned as he talked about how his mother and father will be. Arg. He didn't like this feeling. The Tendo home was supposed to be Bel-chan's, a place where he'd always be welcome. Well, it was about time he went back to that place, blue specks in his eyes or not. Feeling full of purpose once more, he walked to the door calmly, and asked to see Ranma. Kasumi lead him through the house, feeling the awkwardness the other Tenbos felt when he was around, as he passed her to the dojo, where Ranma was keeping himself busy doing katas. Ryo waved. Hey Pop. Oh, hey Ryo. Feeling better, huh? Good enough, said Ryo. Hey, listen, Pop, you hid the lockets, right? Course I did. Well, I think it's time. Time? Ranma blinked and looked at Ryo cluelessly. Time I went home, said Ryo. Time everyone else went home too. Oh. Ranma nodded. Well, I hid one of them behind the shrine, he said, tilting his head at the shrine on the dojo wall. Ryo immediately went to it and searched blindly with his hand. Pop? You sure it's here? Yeah, I'm sure, said Ranma. Move aside, let see. He reached behind the shrine, and blinked. Oh boy. Ryo gave him a haggard, wary look. What do you mean, oh boy? A pair of silhouettes appeared at the doorway. Hey, Ryo, said the stern female voice. There's something we need to straighten out. Ryo turned around. Children. The woman didn't look happy, and Ishido looked even less so. "You aren't taking children away from me," said Ishido. His battle aura flickered slightly. Ryo sighed. "Oh boy. Asterisk 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 asterisk." A gentle knock on the door turned Miyabi's head. Kaeri entered, giving Miyabi a smile and a gentle squeeze on the shoulder, then stood by Muhoshin's side. "I found it," she said, then pulled a shining silver locket from her pocket. Muhoshin smiled. The straitjacket holding him disappeared with an azure flash. He took the locket from her hand, held it high, then suddenly pressed it to his chest. Azure flames blazed from beneath his hand and a whirlwind seemed to rush through the room. And then all was quiet. What did you do?" asked Miyabi. Muhoshin didn't stand so much as he slithered up to a standing position. From under his shirt, Miyabi noticed a pulsating azure glow. "Just took my heart back," mumbled Muhoshin. Another flash of blue engulfed him and he suddenly had on a new gray suit, tailored and pressed to perfection. "You couldn't find the other one?" he asked Kaeri. She shook her head. "I'm sorry," Muhoshin sang. "No need to apologize. This one will do." Miyabi suddenly had a bad feeling about this, but she couldn't leave now. As Kaeri rushed up to Muhoshin's side and embraced him, Miyabi knew the scarred girl might be blind to Muhoshin's faults. Someone had to watch out for her. For better or worse, she was with them. "Pardon me, ladies, but I've errands to run," said Muhoshin. "Errands?" asked Miyabi. "What kind of jar?" "Hey!" Suddenly, she found herself bathed in azure flames and fading into nothing. "What's going on here?" Muhoshin gave her a reassuring smile. "Just sending you and Kaeri ahead. Don't worry, I'll be with you soon." Miyabi yelled in protest, but her words were lost as she and Kaeri vanished in flashes of bright blue. Alone once more, Ryo Muhoshin's grin lost all warmth. "Suddenly, I'm in the mood for okonomiyaki." Asterisk 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 asterisk. Ranma moved into a fighting stance, ready to defend his son. Ryo, however, had other ideas. "Dad, it's okay." "Listen, guys," said Ryo Saotome wearily. "Let's talk about this." "We're just a little worried," said Children, not relaxing a bit. "You seem to be very keen on setting everything right, and that would mean sending Ishido back to where he came from." "I don't want to go back," said Ishido firmly. "I am not going back. I'm staying with Children." Ryo held his hands up in submission. Okay, you guys want to stay together. I understand that. Fine." He hesitated a moment, thinking of the words to say to defuse the situation. "Right, okay, I'll let you stay together," lied Ryo. Muhoshin's last words nagged at him. "You're just like me." "No," he said to himself. "No, I'm not." "And where are the lockets, anyway?" asked Children. "Well, one was right here," said Ryo. "You sure, Pop?" "Yeah, I'm sure," said Ranma. It was right. Suddenly, flames of blue erupted in the air an arm's length in front of Ryo and faded away to reveal an okonomiyaki takeout box. Reflexively, Ryo caught it before it fell to the ground. Ryo's sinking feeling sunk even lower as he opened the box. Written in sauce were the words "Help me," and scribbled inside the box lid were the following lines: "Hear the loud alarm bells, brazen bells. What a tale of terror now, their turbulency tells. In the startled ear of night how they scream out their affright. Too much horrified to speak, they can only shriek, shriek, out of tune, in a clamorous appealing to the mercy of the fire, in a mad expostulation with the deaf and frantic fire, leaping higher, 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 with a desperate desire, and a resolute endeavor, Maunadu Sidor. Never, by the side of the pale-faced moon. Oh, the bells, bells, bells. Catchy, isn't it? Muhoshin P.S. Ryo dropped the box, his arms trembling. Oh no. Bell-chan. End Act 8 End Act 8 QUIXOTE by Susan Duanime Characters and backstory by Rumiko Takahashi. Used without permission. Ranma slept. This was not exactly an unusual occurrence. It happened every night, and usually did not stir any interest or comment. Breathe in, breathe out. Turn slightly. Mutter. The reader may be wondering why such a common event is being described. Be patient. Like most martial artists, Ranma was a light sleeper. With the amount of people after his head, he really had to be. So when the object came sailing through the window to land with a clatter on the floor, one of his eyes shot open. A few seconds later, a flare of brilliant light filled the room, and the eye snapped shut. Springing to his feet, trying to blink away the spots dancing in front of his vision, Ranma waited for the attack. Muse, perhaps? Sasuke? It wasn't really Kuno or Ryuga style. Perhaps some entirely new enemy? His senses reached out to take in the entire room, to perceive every flow of Kai, to prepare for the barrage of thrusts that was about to come. A minute passed. Maybe it was some sort of Kai blast that took time to charge. 5 minutes passed. His brow furrowed. A flash bomb used to blind your opponent was a sound tactic, but only if you followed up on it immediately. His vision had long since returned to normal, and he was now on guard. His foe had thrown away the advantage of surprise for no good reason. After 30 minutes, he gave up and went back to sleep. But with one eye open, just in case. A job at his sleep that night was an exhausting affair, and to compensate he rose in the late morning. Some joker, he mused, was trying to rattle him. Ranma shrugged. He could deal with it. After breakfast, after pulling on his clothing, he skipped downstairs and into the kitchen, and froze. The room was occupied by Akan, Kaeri, and P-chan, and a sink full of warm, soapy water. Time for P-chan's bath. Could Akan? Kaeri smiled benevolently. Oh my god, dot, she single quote will kill Ryuga and then she'll kill me. Ken. No. His fiancé didn't even turn. What is it, Ranma? I'm just giving P-chan a bath. She began to lower the pig towards the water. No. Warm water's really bad for them. Kaeri spoke for the first time. On the contrary, it's necessary for their good health to be bathed every so often. See? Ken said, a smug tone in her voice. And Kaeri should know, her being a pig breeder. Horrified, Ranma thought. Kaeri wanted to break any possibility of a Ryuga/Ken relationship in the most complete way she could. Ken dunked P-chan into the soapy, warm sink. Ranma closed his eyes, and waited for the carnage. Kaeri, hand me the soap. Huh? He opened his eyes. P-chan was happily splashing about in the sink filled with warm water. Dashing over to where the two girls stood, he dipped his finger in the water. Warm. It was warm. And Ryuga was a pig. He stared at his friend's eyes in horror. The eyes stared back. Empty. A pig's eyes. Ranma? Is something wrong? Oh no. Ryuga. Oh, man. Kaeri grabbed his arm. What about Ryuga? He turned to face her. She didn't look upset in the slightest. He didn't change back. He's stuck in his cursed form. What cursed form? The girls asked simultaneously. Ranma closed his eyes. This was going to get him in trouble, but P-chan is Ryuga with a Jizenkaiu curse. The warm water should have changed him back. But it didn't. Something's trapped him like this. Ken turned pale. You mean he? At my bed, my bed. Kaeri just looked puzzled. Ranma, that's not true. What do you mean? You've known about the curse too. My bed. I'm going to. Ryuga, Kaeri said calmly, is not P-chan. Why would I be P-chan? Asked Ryuga, who had just strolled in from the dining room. Who had just. Ranma looked at the sink. P-chan was splashing about happily in the water. He turned back to the door. Ryuga was standing in the door frame, looking bemused. There was a bucket of water in a corner, and Ranma threw it at Ryuga. It hit dead on. Ryuga made an amazing transformation. He went from a dry, bemused Ryuga to a wet, annoyed Ryuga. Ranma, why are you throwing water at me? Ranma, snarled Ken, why are you trying to give me a heart attack with filthy lies about Ryuga and P-chan? Oh number, Ryuga, he said hesitantly, can we talk? I think that would be wise, the lost boy evenly replied. At they went for a walk. There was something odd about Ryuga, thought Ranma. He wasn't trying to kill him. He didn't really even seem all that mad. And there was something else, something he couldn't quite place. Ryuga, how'd you get cured? Cured of what? The curse. Ryuga stared at him. What curse? The one you got at Jizenkaiu, stupid. Ranma, Ryuga slowly said, I've never been to Jizenkaiu. Then it struck him what seemed wrong about Ryuga. Hey, man, when did you paint your umbrella blue? It's always been blue. Ranma, did you hit your head fighting Yukayu or something? Fighting. The flash of light, with no attack following. I think I'd better go see Cologne. Ryuga looked puzzled. Why do you want to talk to him? Oh boy. Ranma recognized the Amazon matriarch the second he saw her. Or, rather, the second he saw _him _. Cologne was male. Apprentice. What can I do for you? Something's wrong, he said flatly. My memories don't match reality. You should be female, and Ryuga should apologize and Kaiju curse. The withered old man listened as Ranma told about the burst of light, the events in the kitchen, and his conversation with Ryuga. Finally he spoke. I think I know what has happened, but I will need to make sure. If you will stand still for a moment. Ranma did, and Cologne rummaged around for a selection of scrolls. After settling on one, he began doing in an odd, harsh language. The room grew dark, and the odd aura flared around Ranma's body. Despite an urge to scream and run, he held still. Cologne finally fell silent, and the glow surrounding Ranma faded. The old man slowly nodded. As I thought. You are not from this reality. Huh? Someone has exchanged you with the Ranma Saotome of this universe. You are not where you belong. His head spun. Of course, that explained everything. How do I get back? Cologne frowned. It will not be easy. There are tales of a magical locket that let one move from one world to another, said to be lost somewhere in China. If you could find that, somewhere in China. Do you have any idea how big China is? The old man stroked his beard. True, true. It may indeed take a while. I don't even speak the language very well. Your best friend does. Ranma laughed. Ryuga? He doesn't. No. I mean Shampoo. I'd hardly call her my best friend. She wants to marry me. Cologne laughed. Really? How odd. The Shampoo of this world just sees you as a close friend. Although Yukayu did once try to fix you two up so that you'd stop bothering Akan. Ranma frowned. Yukayu's a guy in this world. No, a lesbian. So is Akan. They've been going steady for months, although we never were able to get you to give up on her. Oh my g that single quote s you single quote got to get me back to my world. Shampoo entered from the back room. Oh, Neo Ranma. You spar with Shampoo? Great-granddaughter, Ranma needs your help. It took half an hour to persuade Shampoo to go with him. After some last-minute advice from Cologne, the two headed out the door. If it takes 1,000,000 years, Ranma thought grimly, I'm going to find my way home. Book and Akan. He shuddered. Cologne watched the pair head off in the direction of the docks, smiled, and put on a kettle. After a minute, Ryuga walked in. Is he gone? Yes. Cologne lifted the kettle and poured it over himself, rapidly shifting into female form. You did well, boy. I was afraid you'd foul up. Ryuga rubbed his head. I had trouble convincing Kaeri to go along with it, but she gave in. Even helped me find a piglet the same color and size as P-chan. Got any more of that instant Nibunnoichi? By the way? Cologne handed him a box. Here you go. Except for the packet you used, and the packet I used, it should be full. Good. Ryuga frowned for a second. What do I tell Akan? The truth. Tell her that Ranma left for China with shampoo, and never wants to see her again. She'll be upset, and you'll be there to comfort her. And Ranma? He'll spend years searching China for a magical reality-traveling locket that doesn't exist, while the delayed action love spell I cast on him starts taking effect. He'll marry Shampoo within 2 years. Ryuga grinned happily. And Akan will be mine. If you work hard at it. Cologne frowned. Something she had said was nagging at her, but she didn't know what. Oh well. It couldn't have been very important. There are an awful lot of reality travel fanfics, with Ranma waking up in another world for no good reason. In all of them, it's odd how quickly he accepts the fact that he really has been transported to an alternate dimension. Or maybe not so odd, considering the weirdness of his life. Another common theme is how his love for Akan eventually carries him through the plots and dangers tossed at him. In the end, it does seem to be the reason for his coming out on top. A cunning enemy would turn this strength into a weakness. Special thanks to Kevin Eve, Chris Wilmore, and RPM. Mythical reality traveling locket indeed. Susan doing